If you could take your seats, please. Going to recognize Councilor Leary to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everybody, and welcome back. I hope everyone had a relaxing August because now there is work to be done. Remotely this evening, we have Councilors Lipoff, Wright, Humphrey, and Greenberg. And I believe Councilor Mickley may be joining online and then coming in. We are going to proceed with our items on first call. We then have a couple of items on second call. And after that, we are going to adjourn into a committee of the whole chaired by Public Facilities. So Chair Albright will lead that discussion for a discussion of the Bullows Pond project. I want to be very clear. There is no intent to take any vote this evening on the Bullows Pond project. This is merely an opportunity in a committee of the whole setting for the Public Facilities. Public Facilities has heard this a number of times already. It's an opportunity for the DPW leadership and the consultants to present on the project. It's an opportunity for people to ask questions about the project. And then Chair Albright's going to schedule a further committee meeting at a later date whenever she puts it on the agenda. So just want to be clear as to expectations. This is a regularly scheduled city council meeting. We are being both audio taped and videotaped. We are starting at a slightly earlier time so we can accommodate the committee of the whole and hopefully be done at a reasonable hour. So with that, I'm going to recognize Chair Kelly for the Land Use Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President, and happy September, everybody. Aren't we excited for the new fall session? On page 191 of your booklet here, the Land Use Committee report starts. We met on August 19th. There were a couple of held items, but the ones I can report on are items 224-25, which was a request to exceed FAR at 25 Freeman Street, approved 5-0. Number 225-25, a request to amend a special permit number 127-16 to waive 5 additional parking stalls at 288 Walnut Street. That was approved 6-0. Number 226-25, a request to extend non-conforming height at 163 Lincoln Street, approved 5-0. And finally, number 227-25, a request to amend a site plan associated with a special permit 139-24 to allow a retaining wall exceeding 4 feet in height at 157 Baldpate Hill Road. That was approved 6-0. And we do, as you mentioned, have an item on second call. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. Next, Chair Baker for Zoning and Planning Committee, please.
We have one item on second call. I think we did our business and reported it before this committee, but let me just double check.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councilor Baker. Next for the Programs and Services Committee, Chair Krinsman.
Thank you, Mr. President. There is no report this evening.
Next for the Public Safety and Transportation Committee, Chair Grossman.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's no report this evening.
This is for those watching us at home. This is typical for a first meeting in September. We get much busier as the season gets underway. Next, Public Facilities Committee, Chair Albright.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's no report tonight, but I do have some public hearings to announce, if I could.
Please go ahead and do so.
We have item 221-25 and 222-25 will have public hearings on September 3rd, tomorrow, Wednesday, and they're both Eversource grants of location. I also have a motion that I need to make.
You need a motion to suspend the rules?
Yes, I need to.
Hold on. Go ahead. Tell us what the motion's for, please.
I need to suspend the rules so that we can take up item 5625 before the date of September 15th so that we can send it back to committee.
So there's a motion by Chair Albright to suspend the rules to take up an item that was originally scheduled for September 15th this evening. So it's on second call and then send it back to committee. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. So we'll take it up on second call tonight. Thank you. Next, Chair Gentile for the Finance Committee, please.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. And Chair Danberg for the Real Property Reuse Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's no report.
All right, thank you. With that, Madam Acting Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Counselor Albright,
Aye.
Counselor Baker, Counselor Bigsby,
Aye.
Counselor Block,
Aye.
Counselor Danberg,
Aye.
Counselor Downs, Counselor Farrell,
Aye.
Counselor Gentile, Counselor Getz,
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg,
Aye.
Counselor Grossman,
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey,
Aye.
Counselor Kalis,
Aye.
Counselor Kelly,
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman,
Aye.
Counselor Leary,
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff,
Aye.
Counselor Lobovitz, Counselor Lucas,
Aye.
Counselor Maliki,
Aye.
Counselor Mickley, Counselor Oliver,
Aye.
Counselor Wright,
Aye.
President Laredo.
Aye,
The motion passes 21-0 and 3 absent.
thank you. So we're on second call. I'm going to recognize Chair Albright first on item 56-25, which is the main drain extension at 132 Homer Street.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is about a main drain extension on Chapin Road, 16 and 17 Chapin Road. And this has been a complicated project with opposing engineering reports. And the suggestion was made by, actually, it was Councilor Kelly that made the suggestion. What if we had a third-party review of all of the engineering reports? And the way we do with land use with peer reviews. So after she made that suggestion, I talked it over with the law department, with DPW, and they thought everyone was fine with the idea. So in order to do that, we need to send it back to committee. So my motion would be to send this item back to committee.
Okay, so motion by Counselor Albright to send it back committee. Is there a second for that motion? Seconded by Counselor Leary. Discussion on the motion. Counselor Lucas.
Thank you, President Laredo. Yeah, Council Albright is correct. This is a tough one. And it's also controversial. I think many of us know what's going on here. But, you know, Council Albright wants to refer this back to committee. I think we need to have a conversation about this. There's many things I want to say, but first thing I want to say is I want to lead off with something that we discussed earlier this term when we had ADUs in front of us on second call. And I think it was Councilor Oliver, Vice Chair of ZAP, who wanted to refer it back to that item or items back to committee because he felt as though it needed more work. I supported him in that effort. And what he wanted to do is similar to what Councilor Albright is trying to do right now. The item needs more work. The only difference is that Councilor Oliver's motion to refer it back to committee was denied by this council. I didn't appreciate that. I know he didn't appreciate that. But now we're going to do the same thing with Councilor Albright trying to refer this back to committee. So I think we need to have a conversation about this. When is it appropriate to refer items back to committee? And I think we should always help one another in the chamber here when it comes to items like this, controversial items, complicated items. If a counselor particularly a committee chair or vice chair, wants to refer an item back to committee because they feel as though it needs more work, we should agree to that. Assuming, of course, there is no pending time limit on it, like a public hearing closed for a land use item. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to talk about is something that I mentioned the last time this item was on second call, was that I want everyone on this council to make a good faith effort to go to the site in person and review it for themselves. And you will get a completely different idea of what is going on here. It is one thing to look at this petition on a PowerPoint or in a engineering memo. It's another thing to actually go to the site, see how it is, the site is actually beneath Chapin Road. This is a huge, huge issue for this neighborhood. They have hired their own lawyer, their own engineer. They didn't want to have to do this, but they're doing this because they are concerned about their personal property and their neighborhoods, their homes. So I just have to say those things because I do want everyone to see what is actually happening at the site. The other thing is that if this does go back to public facilities, it's a question for DPW, which I know we're in full council right now, but I do wonder if they've already identified a third-party engineering firm to do this work. And I do hope they do a deep dive into everything about the site. And I mean everything. The history of the site, the fact that no one.
Councilor Lucas, you're out of time. Do you want another minute?
I need another minute, please.
All right, all in favor of giving Councilor Lucas another minute, please say aye. Aye. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Reviewing the site.
Train of thought. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Reviewing the site and the fact that there's never been a home or homes on these parcels of lands ever. That's important. The other thing I want to say is, and I don't serve on PF, and ultimately it is up to the discretion of the chair, but because a lot of neighbors have put in a lot of time and effort and their own money into this, I would ask, it's up to the discretion of the chair, if they would be allowed to comment at the next public facilities meeting when this item is on the agenda. So that is all I have to say for now. Thank you very much for the extra time.
Thank you, Councilor Lucas. Anyone else wish to be heard on this item? Councilor Humphrey, and we've been joined by Councilor Mickley online. Councilor Humphrey, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't personally have an objection to sending it back to committee, but I don't understand how this item is before us tonight.
Is that a question to me or a question to the chair of the committee?
That's a question to you as the presiding officer. This was postponed to a date certain, which Councilor Oliver raised by email earlier today, and I didn't see an answer to that.
And we just on first call changed it so that we would take it up earlier this evening, and that's what we voted on, Councilor Humphrey.
All right.
All right. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think I'm fine with sending it back to committee. I also would just comment that I think it's always case by case on whether to send something back by committee. So I don't think anything sets a precedent one way or another. It's the different situation when we're talking about a different vote earlier this term.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Gentile and then Leary.
So I just want to assure the councilor from Ward 2 that I took his advice to heart, and I was at the site this morning as Councilor Block and Councilor Maliki can attest to. So I did listen to him. But I would still say that the right move right now for all involved is to do more work on this. I think it's a great idea to get the peer review done. This is a perfect kind of a situation to do it in. So I will be supporting recommitting this to public facility.
Thank you, Councilor Gentile. Councilor Leary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also support sending this back to committee and to answer Counselor Humphrey's question, the reason it's going back to to committee is because that's what the law department told us was the process to do that in order to have this third party. And I'm also, I think in this particular instance, again, each by case, we do need more information about this. It's a very complicated project. And I think this will be critical to us better understanding the project. Thank you.
Counselor Larry. Counselor Block, and then Counselor Danberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think another engineering report is very important. I think it's important that this engineering firm have the confidence of everyone, including the neighbors who have their own engineer. So just a suggestion to DPW that they take care to consult with the neighbors and that there be a consensus regarding who's going to do this additional report. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Block. Counselor Danberg, and then Counselor Maliki.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a Ward 6 item. We in Ward 6 have been looking at this in depth for a long time now. I think I support the sending it back to the committee because I think that we are all looking forward to hearing from another reviewer, an engineering firm that the city will choose. We've had a number of engineering firms, work done by engineering firms that have worked for the city and done projects over the years. And I'm confident that we will get good work done on this. When you have conflicting reports from engineering firms, it's disconcerting. And in this case, I think this is the wisest move that we can make. And I look forward to hearing from the engineering firm when they get their report done. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Danberg. Counselor Maliki.
Thank you. I have been to the site as was mentioned. For anyone who has the time and wants to geek out, you can listen to there were 3 Board of Survey meetings in September, October, and November 2023 when this subdivision was approved, and I wanted to listen to them, and I did. One member of the planning board had serious reservations about the stormwater issue, having experienced, not personally, but having a neighbor experience something happening near them with a development that was supposed to be all, signed and sealed and going to work, and it didn't work, and she's getting her basement pumped every 6 months or something. This was Ms. Lynn Breckenridge, and she expressed her reservations, but voted along with the rest of the planning board for the subdivision, feeling that the storm drain extension was not within their purview. So essentially, the Board of Survey has sort of punted that question to us. So I think we have to take a serious look at that. Looking at the plans myself, it seems to be a bit of a moving target. So I want to make sure that the DPW's third-party reviewer kind of reviews the most current plan, and the most current plan corrects any issues that were raised before. One of them being that in the October meeting at the Board of Survey, the engineer for the applicant called in and said that the fire department's only concern was that there not be stormwater containment systems in the front yards of these 2 properties. And yet the plans that showed up at, I guess it's July, public facilities had the stormwater systems in the front yard. We've heard there's going to be a change from 5 feet raising of grade to 3 or something feet raising of grade. I also noticed that although the presentation said no tree is larger than 12 inches were going to be cut, on the plot plans, for example, the 42-inch tree says TBR, which I believe means to be removed. And indeed, it would be very close to the theoretical footprint of the house. So I would just ask that all the sort of details of whatever they're going to have the third-party reviewer review be kind of nailed down so that they're what they're supposed to be and that the third-party review is actually meaningful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Maliki. Just under 3 minutes. Perfect timing. Anyone else wish to be heard on this item? Seeing none, I do note that Councilor Wright is in the chamber now, no longer online. Will you call the roll, please, Ms. Flynn? And an aye or a yes vote is to send it back to committee. A no vote is to reject sending it. Go ahead.
Counselor Albright,
Aye.
Counselor Baker,
Aye.
Counselor Bigsby,
Aye.
Counselor Block,
Aye.
Counselor Danberg,
Aye.
Counselor Downs, Counselor Farrell,
Aye.
Counselor Gentile,
Aye.
Counselor Getz,
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg,
Aye.
Counselor Grossman,
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey,
Aye.
Counselor Kalis,
Aye.
Counselor Kelly,
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman,
Aye.
Counselor Leary,
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff,
Aye.
Counselor Lobovitz, Counselor Lucas,
Aye.
Counselor Maliki,
Aye.
Counselor Mickley,
Aye.
Counselor Oliver,
Aye.
Counselor Wright,
Aye.
President Laredo.
Aye.
The motion passes 22-0 and 2 absent.
Thank you. We go on to our second item, which is 212-25, appointment of Travis Salters to the Newton Historical Commission. I'm going to recognize the Chair of Zoning and Planning.
Thank you, Mr. President. And colleagues, you may recall this was an item reported earlier by our committee after we had a meeting to consider the appointment. There was no written report, but there is a vote of the committee in favor of the appointment, 4-3. Councilors Oliver, Getz, and Wright were opposed. This is Mr. Salters is an attorney with Goodwin Proctor, has had a distinguished background in the law, and came forward initially to serve on the Historic District Commission, but as we understand it in the process of his nomination, he decided that the Historical Commission would be a better and a more appropriate race for him to serve. And he addressed the committee and answered a number of questions from several people. A number of my colleagues who are on the committee expressed reservations and should speak for themselves. I'll just indicate that if there's any desire to turn down an appointment, they automatically would pass within 60 days of appointment. We're in that period of time, unless the council by 2/3 of those present and voting votes to reject the appointment. So that's where procedurally the item stands, and I will yield to my colleagues who who have put this on second call initially and then move to postpone.
Thank you, Chair Baker. Who wished to be heard on this item? Councilor Wright?
Mr. Salters, who's very personable, seems like a great guy. He's a lawyer with experience in merger and acquisition transaction. He's very smart, impressive resume. He brings a history of serving underserved populations in Atlanta, including exposing high school students to college and career opportunities, turning around poor performing schools and neighborhoods, coaching teachers and Teach for America and more. He has a track record of giving back to his community. In my opinion, Mr. Salters, with his experience and professional background, is much better served for any of the following committees that have openings: Newton Housing Authority, Community Education Commission, and Human Rights Commission. He would be an asset to Newton Fair and Affordable Housing Partnership, Newton Affordable Housing Trust, Board of License Commission, Youth Commission Advisory Board, and others. Mr. Travis does not have experience in preservation. He did not request the Newton Historic Commission. He did the local one, and it was the mayor who recommended him to the commission. I believe Mr. Salter's talents would better serve our community if he were to serve on another committee. Since then, this issue appeared in one of the local papers, and Mr. Corey Bowen has applied to Newton Historic Commission and has over 20 years of historic preservation experience, including chairman of Winchendon Historic Commission, and was awarded Preservationist of the Year. I would like to see people nominated with experience or knowledge in preservation and architecture on the Newton Historic Commission. I'm also searching for more qualified people to serve on the committee. I will vote no on Mr. Salters on the Newton Historic Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Wright. Counselor Farrell.
Let me thank you again.
Much better. Go ahead, please.
I would support the comments of my colleague from Ward 3. I met Mr. Salters. I think he's a very amiable and very capable person. I told him that I was concerned about his lack of experience in historic preservation, and that is a committee that I believe needs to have experienced individuals. They don't need to be professional historians, but they need to be people who are experienced in preservation. Excuse me. Directly, Ward 8 sees an enormous number of tear downs. And I think someone needs to understand the history of tear downs and what we are trying to do in Newton to preserve existing housing that can be renovated and made available to people that we all profess to want to help. Those are middle income people, teachers, firefighters, and the like. And I think perhaps with time, Mr. Salters may have that experience, but I agree that his experience right now leads him to be a perfect candidate for several other commissions. I think the Historic Commission does not need another trainee, but we need someone who does in fact have either professional or experiential experience in historic preservation. So I am going to, with reluctance, vote to oppose this nomination. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Farrell. Yes, Counselor Getz.
I'm just going to rise to speak regarding how I felt in committee. I am very concerned what's happening with the Historic Commission. I've seen an attrition of people that either have personal knowledge or even academic training in historic preservation. And I know that Councillor Albright had brought up that staff speak to the specifics of historic material for specific sites. But what concerns me most is the level of conversation within the actual Historic District Commission meetings. People in prior years, there was a substantive conversation that led to even educating the other members of the commission with regard to the rationale and the reasoning behind why it is important to consider that specific site for historic preservation. So, and this has been a long time coming, and I feel as if it's important for us to put people on the commission that actually support the long-term vision of historic preservation in Newton.
Thank you, Counselor Getz. We've been joined by Counselor Lobovitz online. Anybody else wish to be heard? Counselor Lucas and then Malik.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to associate my comments with those who spoke before me on this particular item. I will join them in voting no on this particular appointment. I do just want to read one thing into the record. We received an email from Mayor Fuller on August 11th about this appointment. She writes, "At a time when it is hard to find civic-minded people, we want to encourage those who are willing to give their time and talent." I can think of a number of people who've been kicked off of committees in the last few years who want to serve, but they were kicked off. Two on the Historical Commission, one on the Newtonville Local Historic District Commission. I think they would make excellent choices for the Newton Historical Commission. We do have people who want to serve, but these individuals who were kicked off had a different opinion on preservation than the administration. So it is very disappointing that I'm going to have to vote no on this appointment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Lucas. Councilor Maliki, please.
Okay, I think Councilors Wright and Getz and Lucas pretty much covered my points. I have also, along with especially Councilors Wright and Getz, watched a lot of Newton Historical Commission meetings, and it's very disappointing to see the results of those meetings. And as has been mentioned, I can think of, half a dozen people who are either former members or would be great prospective members who I think are not optimistic that they would get, forwarded by the mayor if they even applied. And I hope for a different outcome next year. But I will vote no for tonight because that's all I can do.
Thank you, Councilor Maliki. Councilor Albright.
So I just feel like I need to relate a story that happened in the Historic Commission back some number of years ago, when one of the members of the commission, the commission was discussing the house on Chestnut Street, that a historic house on Chestnut Street that was the people, the sisters who owned the house were trying to preserve it, not tear it down. They hired an architect who is well known in Newton, is an expert in historic preservation. And it went before the Historic Commission several times. And finally, on the last time, the experts on the Historic Commission said they didn't like the portico over the side door and rejected the plan to in the renovation of this house to preserve it. And instead the house was torn down. So, sometimes the experts don't do the right thing either. And I think this man has an interest in historic preservation. He lives in a historic house. And I plan to vote for him.
Thank you, Councilor Albright. Anyone else wish to be heard on the item? Seeing none, I'm going to ask the acting clerk to call the roll. A yes or an aye vote is in favor of this nominee. A no or a nay vote is against the nominee. Go ahead, please.
Councilor Albright,
Aye.
Councilor Baker,
Aye.
Councilor Bigsby,
Aye.
Councilor Block,
No.
Councilor Danberg,
Aye.
Councilor Downs, Councilor Farrell,
No.
Councilor Gentile, Councilor Getz,
No.
Councilor Greenberg,
Aye.
Councilor Grossman,
Aye.
Councilor Humphrey,
No.
Councilor Kalis,
No.
Councilor Kelly,
Aye.
Councilor Kritzman,
Aye.
Councilor Leary,
Aye.
Councilor Lipoff,
Aye.
Councilor Lobovitz,
No.
Councilor Lucas,
No.
Councilor Maliki,
No.
Councilor Mickley,
Councilor Mickley,
Aye.
Councilor Oliver,
no.
Councilor Wright,
No.
President Laredo,
Aye.
the motion passes 13 yeas, 10 nays, and 1 absent.
All right, thank you very much. We move on to our last item of the evening. This was chartered by Councilor Block last time. This is 177-25. It's a request to allow 3 single-family attached dwellings at 790 Watertown Street. Councilor Block.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the June 17 meeting of the Land Use Committee, the petitioner presented his plan to demolish the existing building at 790 Watertown Street and construct 3 single-family attached dwellings. After the planning department made its presentation, Chair Kelly invited comments from the public. We heard from Danielle Alvin Back, who lives at 10 Elliott Avenue on the northwest corner of the intersection. She testified that she and other neighbors were concerned about how the proposed plan would affect the safety of the intersection. She went on to describe some of the accidents that have occurred at this intersection, including how on 2 occasions vehicles crashed through their fence and ended up on their lawn. She concluded her remarks by asking, and I quote, "How are we going to improve safety at this intersection, and is there a possibility of installing bollards at the intersection to protect pedestrians?" I found Ms. Alvin Bach's testimony unusually relevant. I'd read the prepared materials from the developer and from the planning department, and I did not recall anyone mentioning the safety of the intersection. I asked myself, how can we make a determination about whether this plan will have an adverse effect on the neighborhood if we don't discuss the safety implications of the project? Several counselors on the committee had suggestions regarding the project, so we voted to hold the item. I was relieved because I anticipated that the planning department would have some information and ideas at our next meeting regarding the safety issues raised by Ms. Alvin Bach. When the Land Use Committee took this up again on July 22nd, I was surprised and dismayed that neither the petitioner or the planning department mentioned safety issues in their presentations. Isn't this a glaring deficiency in our analysis? Shouldn't we expect any possible safety issues to be carefully considered by planning so that we, the council, can have a basis for making the required determinations whether the plan will have an adverse effect on the neighborhood? Lacking this information, I decided to look into the matter myself. I want to thank Jen Martin for providing instructions on how to access state crash data. I want to thank Jacob Silber, at-large candidate for City Council from Ward 8, for downloading and filtering the data. And I want to thank Ned Codd for information regarding the installation of the 4-way stop sign at Watertown and Eddy Streets. Before you all have copies of the downloaded crash data. It shows the crash rates after the 4-way stop sign was installed in October 2023 to be almost identical to the crash rate before the stop sign installation. In other words,
Councilor Block, you're out of time. How much more do you need?
I'll need about another minute, Mr. President.
Why don't we give Councilor Block another 2 minutes? All in favor, please say aye. Aye, opposed? Go ahead.
The crash rates after the 4-way stop sign was installed in October 2023 to be almost identical to the crash rate before the stop sign installation. In other words, we still have a safety problem at the intersection. Now, will the proposed development aggravate the current safety issues? To be honest, I do not know the answer to that question, but I have my suspicions. 2 of the new units will use a new curb cut on Eddy Street. Cars will likely be backing out into Eddy Street about 50 feet from the intersection. I fear we are creating a new hazard where none currently exists. This is why I voted against the plan in committee, and it is why I will vote again against it tonight. More important than the outcome of the vote on this item is what process we should follow when considering future special permit petitions. It seems to me if there are any, and I mean any safety issue, that it must be analyzed by the planning department. We need to know the seriousness of the problem and what mitigations are possible. It is all well and good that we discuss FAR, building heights, setbacks, and other zoning requirements. But if we do not receive information and analysis on safety matters, I don't see how we can function as a quasi-judicial body and make the required determinations. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Block. I have Councilor Lipoff, please.
Yes, thank you. This one's pretty straightforward to me. The by right The by right is 3 units. The by right is a 2-family with the allowance of an ADU, and that's 3 units. So for me, the increase in traffic here with such a small property that can be 3 units and is going to be 3 units is really what we need to be looking at. And the process, the special permit process in our city is robust, and when necessary and when the size of the property allows, when it's necessary, we do major traffic studies. On smaller properties like this, it is thought of, it is considered, and if there's a problem, it will be raised by the planning department. So we do not need to change our process. I think that this is what we always consider with every petition. This is very straightforward. 3 units by right, 3 units being asked. I don't see how there is a traffic increased problem here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Lipoff. So I have next Councilors Wright, Farrell, Leary, and Kelly.
I want to address the stop sign and the safety there and in the data here. And I go through this intersection probably multiple times a day, bike and also driving. And the stop sign, I think, is safer than what it was before. If you take a look at the data, this data included the 2 years in COVID, which, as most of you know, not many people were out driving. So if you take a look 1 year before and 1 year after when the stop sign was put in, there's twice as many accidents before the stop sign versus after the stop sign. So I do think the stop sign has made it safer. It's not the best. I'd like to see it even better. But from a safety standpoint, that intersection is getting better. And there isn't as many accidents if you look at it from just 1 year and take out the 2 years of COVID. And I agree with what Councilor Lipoff said too. They could put 3 units here. So I don't see an issue allowing the 3 units. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wright. Councilor Farrell.
Mr. President, first of all, I want to thank our colleague from Ward 4 for consistently reminding us about the importance of traffic issues on all developments and how they impact us in a city that has terrific traffic issues. I'm concerned in this particular instance, however, that I shared with our colleague, that I believe that we need to be looking at a lot of the ordinance about land use and how we make decisions and what is the information that we should have before us, and that we get trained appropriately to do that. In this instance, however, I believe the developer responded to all of the reasonable requests as they are currently stated. And I'm pleased to hear that the efforts at this intersection have improved, but I think it's important for us to consider this as a land use issue in some instances, and we should define those instances when traffic becomes an issue about what does it do to the quality of life in a neighborhood. So I'm going to vote in favor of this at the moment, but I hope that we will consider all of the land use considerations at some point in the near future before the new term begins. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Farrell. I have Councilors Leary, Kelly, and then Lucas. Go ahead, Councilor Leary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I completely agree with my colleagues who have spoken thus far regarding this Lipoff, Wright, and Farrell. And I want to commend Councilor Block for his due diligence and attention to this important matter, because it is something we should always be thinking about. However, this is a small project with 3 units that could be built by right anyway. And I don't think it's the responsibility of small developers or homeowners who want to build a home to deal with traffic issues, that's really the city's responsibility. And that's something that we should be looking at diligently all the time. And especially this budget season, we should look at increasing our budget for traffic calming. So I will be voting in support.
Thank you, Counselor Leary. Counselor Kelly, then Lucas. And we've been joined by Counselor Mickley, who's now here in person rather than virtually.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief. I support what Counselor Leary said and who she supports, starting with Counselor Lipoff. I think we always do consider traffic and safety issues on every land use decision we make. Absolutely. In this case, as has been said, this could be 3 units by right. It could be 2. This would be, if it was 2, it would be 1 additional unit. There are 2 curb cuts. This data shows me, as Councilor Wright pointed out too, that since the stop signs were installed, it is a safer intersection with fewer crashes. Sometimes asking for data on these small things really just feels like a delay and derail tactic to me. And I think we should be as cautious of that as we are of being careful that we're considering safety issues when we proceed. I will be voting in favor of this.
Thank you, Counselor Kelly. Counselor Lucas.
Maybe I get the last word. First of all, I want to thank Counselor Block for the data. I'm also going to ask him to show me how to access the state crash data on the state's website, because there's some other things going on in Newton that I'm interested in looking at. But I'm going to vote for this item. I agree with Counselor Lipoff and Wright and Farrell, Leary, Kelly. You know, you all hit the nail on the head. Hit the nail on the head. So I'm all set with this. I'm going to vote yes.
All right. Anyone else wish to be heard in the item? Seeing none, will you call the roll, please? And a yes or an aye vote is in favor of this petition. A no vote is against it. Go ahead.
Counselor Albright,
Aye.
Counselor Baker, Counselor Bigsby,
Aye.
Counselor Block,
No.
Counselor Danberg,
Aye.
Counselor Downs, Counselor Farrell,
Aye.
Counselor Gentile, Counselor Getz,
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg,
Aye.
Counselor Grossman,
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey,
Aye.
Counselor Kalis,
Aye.
Counselor Kelly,
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman,
Aye.
Counselor Leary,
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff,
Aye.
Counselor Lobovitz,
Aye.
Counselor Lucas,
Aye.
Counselor Malachy,
Aye.
Counselor Mickley,
Aye.
Counselor Oliver,
Aye.
Counselor Wright,
Aye.
President Laredo.
Aye.
The motion passes 22-1 and 1 absent.
So colleagues, we are adjourned from the formal council meeting. We are going to go into a committee of the whole chaired by Chair Albright, Public Facilities presiding. Chair Albright will invite members of the DPW inside the rail if they wish, or at the podium, whatever they'd prefer. It's her call. We will not be taking any further votes this evening, and we will not go back into full council session. Can I suggest we take a 30-second stretch to let everyone get into their seats, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Okay, everybody, I think we should start again. So this is a committee of the whole with the public facilities providing. And the purpose is to discuss these two docket items that I'll read into the record. 103-24, update on planning and construction of Bullow's Pond Dam. Councilor Albright, on behalf of the Public Facilities Committee, requesting update on planning and construction of the Bullow's Pond Dam. And 418-24, Her Honor the Mayor requesting a discussion of the Bullow's Pond Dam Rehabilitation Project and preferred safety design. So the reason why we're having this meeting, we, as President Laredo said, we have met many times in public facilities. Looks like it's 4 times, and had very deep discussions on the dam and all the issues surrounding it and all the plans to fix the dam. At the last meeting, we were getting closer to being ready to vote. And the suggestion was made, how could we possibly send this to the full council and let them know how to vote on it if we don't get everybody else up to speed on all of the machinations and all of the issues that we have learned about in public facilities over this past year. And I know that public facilities discussed it in the prior term as well. So the suggestion was made to have a committee of the whole to bring everybody together and hear all the details and have you have a chance to ask questions. And so that's why we have DPW people here. I'm going to let Commissioner Sullivan introduce her colleagues, and also as well as the consultant who will give us a presentation. We'll go through the presentation, and then I want everybody to feel free to ask questions. So Commissioner Sullivan.
Good evening, councilors. I'm pleased to introduce Jim Nickerson, a consultant from GEI Consultants, who brings extensive experience in planning, evaluation, and design of dam projects. With your permission, Mr. Nickerson will provide a presentation on the Bullow's Dam Rehabilitation Project. Following the presentation, Mr. Nickerson, along with Utilities Director Tom Fitzgerald, City Engineer Alfredo Vargas, Lou Taverna, who is joining us virtually as a former city engineer, and myself will be available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, if you don't mind, if you would like to come up here and give the presentation from here, then everybody can see your face instead of your back. And I'll go down and sit there.
So you've got control of the slides, right? Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to speak before you here tonight. A little louder. Is that better? Okay. So we'll go through, I guess what I'm trying to go through today is sort of the background as to what the issues are at the pond, the steps we've taken to look at alternatives, and then I guess some alternatives we're considering. So the city is under an order from the Office of Dam Safety to repair the dam, to bring it up and to meet current regulations that the state has for the dam. The primary issues that have been identified as being deficient are the primary spillway is undersized for the spillway design flood that the dam needs to be able to pass now. It will lead to an overtopping event, and because it's not armored, that may lead to a breach of the dam, causing more flooding downstream. A couple secondary issues to consider too are the woody vegetation that's grown all along the downstream and upstream slopes of the dam are in violation of the state's requirements for dams currently. And there are some minor masonry repairs at the low level outlet and in the spillway itself that needs to be addressed. Sure. Just wanted to provide a bit of an overview of the dam. It's on Dexter Road. There's a good chunk of the road that actually is the dam. It's an earth embankment dam. It's about 200 feet long. There's a primary spillway, which is made of a concrete weir with a concrete overflow section that sends water underneath the bridge that crosses Dexter Street. The structure itself has a concrete core wall in the middle of it that's intended to help reduce seepage through the dam. And then there are two low-level outlet pipes. They're 24-inch diameter pipes that can be used to help drain the pond, usually for maintenance type operations. It's a cross section through the dam. On the right side is the reservoir, the pond upstream. Most of the dam is the earth embankment section, as I said. And then there's that concrete core wall represented in blue, which is down on top of the bedrock. And you can see schematically there, it sort of reduces the water that's seeping through the dam. The dam is classified as a significant hazard potential dam. And the state requires that to be able to pass the spillway design flood, which would equal a 100-year storm event. We've done a fair amount of looking at the dam evaluations, including starting with hydraulics. We wanted to independently evaluate the hydraulic capacity of the dam. We've developed a hydraulic model to look at, how much rainfall we get in the area, how that hits the ground, how it runs into the pond. That's impacted by things like the slope of the surfaces, the type of surfaces, whether or not they're pervious to absorb some of that water or impervious, it would make that water run a little faster. So all of those things get incorporated into our hydraulic model. Next slide. The 100-year rainfall based on the data set that's out there is an 8.8-inch rainfall event, which would occur over a 24-hour period of time. That's the requirement the state would have us design this to. We ran two different models. One was a one-dimensional model, and the second is a two-dimensional model that looks at the topography a little bit more detailed. We ran those. The 1D model is a simpler one, and then the 2D gets a little more complicated. But in the end, they both showed about the same thing. On the graph on the right, you can see the water level in the pond. The two different lines represents the two different models, which match pretty close. But you can see the dashed line at the top shows the dam crest. So we have a period of time when that water runs into the reservoir, builds up, and then starts to overtop the top of the dam. So when it overtops, that's a failure mode that we're really concerned with. That's an overtopping failure leading to a breach of a dam is really the most frequent cause of a dam failure for earth embankment structures. So what happens, water comes over the dam, you can see in the top image. Once it starts to come over, if we don't have any hardening of the structure or erosion protection, it starts to move soil particles. The more it moves the soil particles, the more it starts to move more, and it eventually evolves back to reaching the full reservoir upstream. And then what happens is we lose the full reservoir. So inclusive then of the water overtopping the dam, we pick up all the water that's in the reservoir that wants to go downstream as well. Some pictures from the downstream side of the dam showing the woody vegetation. This is a pretty densely treed dam slope. Mass DCR, Office of Dam Safety, doesn't allow woody vegetation on the dam or within 25 feet of any, or 20 feet, I should say, of any part of the dam structure. That's pretty standard across the country, from federal agencies to most dam safety programs across the nation. The tree roots themselves, find their way deeper and deeper into the dam. They start to create little loosening of the structure. They can create seepage pathways. When wind blows them over, the root balls can uproot, causing more damage and potential. And as you can see, like on the downstream slope, it doesn't allow a root mat of the grass to grow. So if we do get water coming over the top from an overtopping event, we're looking at bare soil versus grass trying to resist that erosion. So as we went through an alternative evaluation process, our really primary goals we're trying to look at, can we increase reservoir storage to help retain this flood? Are there ways we can increase the spillway capacity so we can send more down so the dam itself doesn't overtop? And then lastly, if it does overtop, what are our options to try to resist the erosion and not allow us to breach the dam with an overtopping event that would reach the reservoir? with all the alternatives we considered, we did have to keep in mind at the end, the Office of Dam Safety is going to have to approve any proposed repair. We would have to submit a Chapter 253 dam safety permit, which gives them really the final say to review and agree with the project. Oh, can you go back? So, as we go through the alternatives process, we start with the do nothing scenario. That's always an option. In this case, we moved past that fairly quickly since it doesn't comply with the order the city's under. We looked at an option to remove the dam. That's another option we typically look at. That would obviously lose the impoundment itself, to then create a non-restriction for water entering Bullows Pond. We'd have to have a pretty significant removal of the embankment itself, which would be Dexter Street. So that would either remove the roadway or need to be a larger bridge structure. We looked at potentially dredging the pond. We did some probing in the pond. We found there was maybe about 6 inches of sediment. Removing the sediment doesn't really help us in passing the design flood. As we take that sediment out of the pond, the water level would drop about the same 6 inches, but there's water always feeding into the pond. And so that water level is controlled by the weir. So within a few weeks, a month maybe, that water level would be back at the same level. And when the spillway design flood were to happen, we wouldn't have any extra capacity at that point. We looked at trying to modify, could we use the low level outlets? The Office of Dam Safety doesn't allow manual operations of the low level outlets themselves as a active way to deal with a storm event. They want a passive system that doesn't require human intervention. We talked about potentially preemptively draining the pond in event of floods, but again, they don't accept that as a solution because over time, people stop doing it. So it doesn't really work effectively in the long term. And then we looked at, are there other ways to add different types of low level outlets? The challenge here really is the size of the system to be able to pass the flood is significant, and we didn't think it was very viable. We considered, is there a way to add an auxiliary spillway, another way to get the water around the structure, but due to the site constraints, that was going to be a real challenge. There's not a lot of property around that would be property taking needed for that expansion of the dam footprint. Not very viable. We considered, could we enlarge the primary spillway? Can we get more flow through that? We looked at whether or not we could add a larger weir, which is the spillway, the length of opening in the spillway water can flow over. There's a couple ways to do that. One is, widening it up into the reservoir. Another is using a labyrinth spillway, which has more length and a smaller footprint. The challenge with those solutions became they're constricted because once you get past it, you still have to go through a fairly narrow opening under Dexter Street at the bridge. So to make it more functional, that would need a much wider bridge. So it became a bridge replacement project and a pretty substantial project. So we didn't see that as being the most viable solution. So then we came back to the alternatives of reinforcing the dam. So in the event it does overtop, we wouldn't have erosion on the downstream side of it, and we wouldn't cause ultimately a potential breach of the dam. So there are a few solutions there that we considered of ways to do that. Ultimately, we originally tried to do it in a way we could argue the downstream slope wasn't part of the dam anymore to keep the trees. The Office of Dam Safety didn't accept that in our discussions with them. But we have one solution, which is a sheet pile wall. The second solution is a modified core wall. And a third solution is a overtopping protection design. I've got more slides on those, so we'll talk a little bit more about those in a few minutes. And then lastly, we had some consideration of whether or not we could raise the height of the dam to hold back more water. That was a challenging with the site constraints. It would have, we have currently about 2 to 3 feet of overtopping predicted. So we need to raise the dam at least that. But once you raise it, that level goes up because the water then still keeps rising. So at the current elevation, only 3 feet of water go up, but then it relieves itself because the water is going over the dam. The more you raise the dam, the more you're trapping more water, not relieving it, so that you're going to chase it. So I'm estimating we'd have to raise it between 4 and potentially 8 feet, which really impacts the surrounding streets. A number of houses that are right on the pond would then also be impacted with the flooding. And adjacent properties on the streets we'd intersect would also have to be, considered how we modify access to those parcels. So just kind of a summary table that we've put together here. At the end, we think that the 3 most viable options we've considered are the overtopping protection, design, and we'll go through those to give you a little bit more detail on what each of those includes. So we'll go through, like I said, the embedded sheet pile wall, the raising the core wall, and a downstream overtopping slope protection project. We have discussed each with the Office of Dam Safety in their discussion with us. They've indicated that they would review any of those options as being potentially viable. They'd want more detail. They want to make sure we demonstrated how these would be stable during and after an event. And in our discussion with them, my feedback was, I think that a couple of them would be more challenging to prove to them that we would have good stability, but we'll go through those. So alternative one we're talking about here is the embedded sheet pile wall. In plan view, it's that yellow line that's a little zigzag. We looked at putting it on the downstream side of the crest, kind of all around the sidewalk area. And it would need some, we call dead man anchors, and we can show those at maybe the next section in cross section. So the sheet pile gets driven into the ground. It could be cut off, so it's buried, you don't see it. And then we restore the ground at the top. We'd have to put in, we believe, these dead man anchors to help provide some lateral stability to the wall if it has to serve in the capacity we're looking at it. If you go to the next slide, as water overtops the dam, this would essentially be designed so that water, if it did overtop the dam, would have the ability to erode any of that soil in that gray area downstream, and that would go potentially be washed downstream. And so you're left with the steel sheet pile with the dead man anchor holding up the rest of the structure, surviving this kind of storm event. It's got to retain the earth that's left in the embankment, plus any water pressure during the storm. And then you can see one of the keys will be, we've got a flexible structure that's trying to hold back all that earth. So we need a couple of points of lateral restraint on it. One, we'd like to do it, see if we can drive that down toe into the rock. If we have a weathered rock seam, we'll be able to get it in, but if we don't, that will be much more of a challenge. And then secondly, we've got the dead man anchor at the top, which would be essentially a trenched in tie rod with a block of concrete that would help us provide lateral restraint.
I just asked the clerk, is it possible to minimize the images below because you can't see the full slide? Thank you.
So this would include about 200 linear feet of sheet piles driven. They'd be about 12 to 15 feet deep each. We'd need to have a dead man anchor system, like I said, that would require excavation up top into the road and restoration. We'd have some utility relocations and adjustments to make. and then obviously landscape restoration and repaving. The second option we considered, we've come up with was this raised core wall alternative. It's similar to the sheet pile solution where we were using it essentially to stop erosion that might happen during the overtopping event at a certain point in the dam, so we don't breach into the full reservoir. If you go to the next slide. So, you know, that existing core wall, which is, we believe, just unreinforced concrete that's been buried now for about 100 years. If we could extend that, so we need to make a structural connection into that, extend it up higher, and then also have a lateral restraint like the dead man system on it to help. If you go to the next slide, ultimately that would allow all that material on the downstream side of that, if it were to erode and come back and stop when it hits the core wall. And then the core wall for some period of time is essentially the downstream side supporting the dam and the water in the reservoir. So this one excavates, 5 feet down to the top of the core wall. We need to anchor into it, form concrete or up around it, dig for the dead man system. We will have utility relocation issues and landscape issues to restore. I think the biggest unknown and uncertainty at this point on that is what is the condition of the core wall that's been buried for 100 years. It wasn't designed originally and acting as a structural element. So we need to make it a structural element. I think the risk here is if we get out there during construction and we find it's not in good condition, where the pivot would be to a much bigger excavation and really a brand new concrete wall. Lastly, of these three alternatives, we evaluated this downstream slope protection using an articulated concrete block system that can be covered with turf, grass. So that's what you see when you're out there. Next slide. So much easier excavation. We're really just disturbing the downstream slope of the dam. We would put down some base materials and then lay these articulated concrete blocks, which I have some pictures on here in a minute. And then as the water overtops the dam, we have potential erosion of that topsoil above the articulated concrete block, but we stop the erosion, way out on the downstream side of the dam versus the other two alternatives we just talked about. So this one has tree removal like the other two. We've got to strip and put in some of these articulated concrete blocks and some fills to give us a nice leveling surface. And then once those are put in place, we would cover them with topsoil and seeding. There's a couple of slides, I think, just to demonstrate a couple of projects that have been completed using this type of system. This was out in Leominster within the last 2 years. The articulated concrete blocks are the system you see down on the ground, plus what the crane is holding up. They come basically as individual blocks that are strung together with stainless steel wires. They go down on the ground, they get pinned down into the ground. As erosion happens, and if water's trying to pluck one of the blocks, they're held together with the stainless steel wires to provide the erosion resistance. Another example of one that was constructed. At the end, you see the concrete blocks on the left image, and then on the right image is after they've put topsoil and seed over the top of them, so you don't see them underneath the ground. There's an example that I came across recently, Lake Tomahawk Dam in North Carolina. This is another dam that had tree removal, articulated concrete blocks placed on the downstream side for overtopping protection. This occurred in mid-2024. You can see laying them on the left and then the sort of finished product on the right with the grass on top of them. Go to the next slide. A few months later, Hurricane Helene came through the area and dropped 12 inches of rainfall in 3 days, causing a lot of flooding across the whole area. This dam was overtopped. You can see in the picture right there. The reports are that they had pretty minimal loss of some of that surface turf, but they otherwise held. We've talked a little bit about overtopping and breaching, so just want to go through those a little bit here for a minute. On the left, you see what is the start of an overtopping event. Water is starting to come up and over the dam. You know, overtopping itself, if we can protect the dam from eroding, we are letting the water pass over, which it currently would do in its current condition. Our estimate right now is that we'd have about 400 cubic feet per second overtopping the dam in both the current condition and our proposed solution. If we were to let that proceed to a dam breach, which is what you see on the right, you know, we're not only dealing with the 400 cubic feet per second, but we're adding water from the reservoir now being discharged downstream at the same time. So we're up to 4 times that amount of water being discharged. This is a map showing the areas of overtopping inundation. So in its current condition and its proposed alternative, with any of those 3 alternatives we're proposing, we don't change this. We have some flooding that comes down down the streets. We're on the order of a foot to a little over a foot in some areas with the overtopping map. Go to the next slide. This is a slightly larger footprint you see. You know, if we allow the breach to occur, that area expands somewhat and the flooding levels go up to about 2.5 or so feet. Each of these alternatives require tree and vegetation removal to comply with the ODS order. We've tried to talk with them on where we could save trees, where we would have to cut them no matter what. Alternatives 1 and 2, we will need to remove a total of 172 trees. For alternative 3, we'd have to remove about 199 trees. This is a map showing the tree removal plan, which would, you can see the gray areas. Those are areas just on the downstream slope. We worked it out with ODS, what the exact limits of the dam were. So as we propose something, we've got their agreement that we're as tight as we can be on what is the dam. This is a map showing that parcel. The green area is essentially the forested area that would not be disturbed with this construction. The yellow area is showing the area of tree removal for the project. City's Parks and Rec staff went through and started to develop some restoration planning where they could plant some trees or do some other landscaping improvements as part of this project. Their ideas that they're proposing would be to add some benches and seated areas in different areas around the pond and at the dam. They'd look for some, no-mow type turfs that they could plant to make the area look appealing. They've identified some trees kind of strategically around the pond where there's some room to plant some additional trees. I think their count was something in the order of 25 to 35 trees they thought they could add just in the immediate area. And then kind of a broader area, I think their count was up to about 200 to 300 trees of the image to the right, a little bit more broadly spaced out from the dam itself. It also includes some repairs to sidewalks and some curbs that might help some erosion in some locations going down towards the pond. as well as removing some invasive species and, enhancing some of the bank areas. And then I think they like to add a couple of little pocket parks, seating areas, and then repair there's a access road down into the pond, a boat launch that I think fire department uses. And there's the location of a pocket park that they're considering. So as we consider the three options, it's our recommendation that we consider option 3. I think the benefits to option 3 is, it's effective for dam safety and for protecting the dam with minimal erosion for the long-term performance of the system. It has the least impact on the road, on the neighborhood right there than the other two. It stops that scour right at the toe of the structure, as opposed to letting that scour work its way back to either the sheet pile wall or a new core wall, which would require for the long term the city to go back in then and do repairs if one of those events were to occur. Office of Dam Safety has seen this solution and they've used it themselves. They've approved other projects that use that type of solution. There are risks with option 1 and 2. Can we demonstrate stability of the sheet pile wall? Will we get good rock embedment? Those are unknowns. Similar with option 2 with the core wall. Is the condition of the concrete going to be in good shape? Are we going to get out there and we'll come back and say this project went from X to add $8 million to it because we need a massive change to make it functional. Those are things I think that make me as the engineer less certain that I think that has a lot of risk to it. So that's why I think option 3 is a preferential solution. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much for that presentation. And now it's your turn. Councilor Kalis.
So, thank you. I mean, I've been in all the public facilities meetings, and I'm still learning. Which this was a great presentation, so I thank you. Can you just clarify options 1 and 2? Why would we remove the trees? That's the one where it's the steel pile and the concrete section that you're elevating. I mean, by doing those two things, doesn't that mitigate the tree removal?
We tried to make the argument with the Office of Dam Safety. They didn't accept that. They still consider that downstream slope part of the dam. So we're putting those structures in essentially to arrest erosion that would start on the downstream and work its way back. We partly came up with those solutions to pitch that to them as a way to save the trees and keep them, but they were not willing to accept that.
Okay. And then on page 18, I don't know. I just want to look at that one. I guess when you say that they wouldn't accept that, is there any going back and forth? There's no discussion. They just say we don't accept it and that's it.
That was our discussion with them. We had them come to the site, walk it with us. We had a formal meeting with them. They won't provide any formal response until we submit a Chapter 253 permit. So there's no official word because their job is to be open-minded until they get something in front of them to formally review it.
Okay, so they just don't like the idea. Okay, so on this one, page 18, so this is either the sheet wall, again, I'm focused on the sheet wall or the increasing the concrete section. Why would the downstream erosion occur if the sheet walls is high enough?
Because, well, the sheet wall wouldn't stick up, so it's not a dam raise situation. It would be below the grade. It would be buried.
Oh, I see. So it's not a barrier per se
Correct.
above okay. All right, thank you.
So Nick.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, before I'm going to questions, just want to sort of take a step back and share some perspective with broader council from those that might not have been part of all the discussions on this. First, a thank you to the Bulls Pond Association for all their work and helping to educate the public on this issue and advocating and making sure this place is a great spot for all. I think the goal of all of us is to minimize the damage to the natural environment and to maximize safety for residents, and to do both those things together. And I think our first and foremost responsibility is to think about how to do that and how to be responsible to residents. And one of the concerns I have with our general approach here is being too focused on a check the box exercise, what the state is asking us to do, and not focused enough in preventing damage and danger to residents downstream. And if you look at the maps that you showed, I think it's on slides 34 and 35, that show the difference between an overtopping event and a dam breach event. I think it highlights pretty clearly that both scenarios are catastrophic. And there's more numbers in a map that you shared with us in a previous meeting where the breakdown is bad in both. So on Harvard Street, for example, the depth above roadway in just an overtopping event, which is what the proposed solution would allow, is 1.7 feet. In a breach event, 2.4 feet. Both are catastrophic, both are bad. You know, the breach is clearly worse, but to me, both need to be mitigated. On Newtonville Ave, the difference is even closer. 1.1 feet in an overtopping event, 1.6 feet in a breach event. So to me, if we go forward with a solution that does damage the natural environment, but does not protect residents from any catastrophic scenario, we're taking something away from residents without serving them, and thus we're failing them. So I think that's sort of where I start philosophically in our responsibility. And then I think about the state mandate and this idea that we're mandated by the state, we need to do it. That may be true, but I think the responsibility of local government is to engage in dialogue with state legislators, with state mandates. And we've seen in the past that strategy yields better results, even with a recent example with the MBTA Communities Act, where initially the state didn't allow for cities and towns to have first floor requirements for commercial retail space. Brookline pushed back on that and a compromise was reached, and the state allowed in certain circumstances for there to be requirements for first floor commercial and by right residential above that. And the state adjusted their plan. So I think we need to have a deeper dialogue, deeper pushback with the state to address not just the concerns they raised, which are important, but to address the broader concerns of what an overtopping scenario would do. And then maybe there are stipulations or requirements around no manual interventions, no adjustments on other aspects that you said the state wouldn't allow, that the language even isn't quite clear. Sort of the state indicated, the state said this. I think we need to have just a more serious conversation about what our goals are in protecting residents with the state and work forward on a plan with that rather than a check the box exercise that, again, imagine a scenario that we do all this, we destroy the woods, and there's an overtopping event that damages and potentially even kills. We will have failed our residents. And I don't think we should put forward a solution that doesn't fully address the problem. And it's on us to engage in dialogue with the state to get to that better solution. Thank you.
Commissioner, do you want to comment on any of the downstream flooding issues? Because you mentioned something in your Q&A. You said you listed a bunch of things that we're doing.
We are systematically addressing flooding across the city, including Newtonville. It will take time and funding to correct all of the issues within the city in terms of drainage.
Just, is there any way to prevent the flooding, the overtopping?
I don't know that I think it's a very practical solution, but to raise the dam, but I think you got to then look at the impacts flooding the other way, right? Because you stop flooding from going downstream, but you don't allow, you allow it to back up in the pond, which impacts in the other direction. So it's a very difficult situation.
Yeah, and I guess my thought process here is, what ideas can we put forward that would actually deal with the overtopping risk, including pumps that may be manual, that maybe the state indicated are not allowed, but maybe if we push back and show them these maps, they'll say, well, that actually makes sense. And maybe you have those conversations. Maybe we just need to be a little more assertive in how far we push them.
But even with pumps, you're sending that water downstream. So if the overtopping provides probably the least damage to the downstream, to be honest with you, because if we're sending the water faster at lower elevations before it can overtop, all that water is still going downstream. If we hold it back till it gets to the crest and then allow less of it to overtop, then that's right now the best throttle to that.
Yeah, and I guess I'm suggesting pumps before an overtopping occurs, so that you have that water before a flood, before a rainstorm, pump water out of the pond so that you don't have all this water all at once. Again, that's just one suggestion. I think we could think of more as well.
Chair, if you don't mind my standing up, I want to thank you very much for this presentation and for all the work that the department has done in doing this. But I would strongly support Councilor Mickley's notion here that the only reason to do this is to provide protection against the people and businesses in Newtonville, as far as I can tell. And the question is whether we're willing to allow a major catastrophe or a minor catastrophe. And I don't know how many buildings and residences and buildings and infrastructure are involved in this pink diagram, as opposed to is it a blue diagram for the lesser catastrophe? But if you've got a foot of water going through this area, and you've got, what, 450 buildings, plus businesses, plus infrastructure, plus Newton South High School, I'm no genius here, but to fix any of that damage at $75,000 per unit, all of a sudden you're talking about some serious money. You know, $50 million. And $50 million to fix the damages of a flood, of a minor catastrophe, doesn't seem to me to be outrageous. And what it costs to fix the problem of a major catastrophe is unbelievable to me. I believe in climate change, and I think this is going to happen. My question is are these three proposed remedies, which all of you professionals agree will allow for an overtopping between 1 and 2 feet of water, that will create this scenario? Is there nothing else, including the pumps that Councilor Mickley refers to, or other situations, where we might have to spend $20 million to protect those homes and businesses and the high school and the roads and the infrastructure? Because we're all going to pay for this anyway. This is going to happen. I agree with you completely. This is going to happen, unfortunately. I wish that the majority of people in Washington agreed with that and would give us all some money to help fix this problem. But I just don't understand why these are the only three options where we say, yep, it's going to happen. And I would like to see financial modeling for what this costs. And I believe we can do that. I'd like to see financial modeling for what the pink disaster costs. And when we start getting over $50 million a year, why are we sitting here saying, well, we can only spend $3 million to fix it, or $10 million to fix it? If we need to spend 20, 25 million, we should consider doing that if it becomes a problem instead of a minor or major catastrophe. Thank you.
Counselor Leary.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I appreciate the comments of my colleagues already. I think our thinking has evolved over the decades in a lot of areas, including stormwater management. And I'm wondering, since I've been on the committee and listening to this for the last 7 years, I'm not sure that the Office of Dam Safety is necessarily always on track with everything here. I think there's room for us to look at things a little differently. I know in terms of stormwater, our thinking has evolved over the decades, and actually improving the health of natural areas and especially healthy forests are one of the best management ways for stormwater and water management in general. And that we haven't really taken advantage of that. And I say that because I'm putting this in the larger context of how we manage stormwater and keep people safe in general. So that's one thing. So, removing all those trees, I question that in the long term. But I also, we've been looking at the model of Arlington, of course, the Arlington Dam. And I'm not sure I got a great answer about why the eye wall, which is interlocking sheets of steel and like this Z shape, and it's topped with a concrete berm. And it sounds very similar to part of option 1 that we were looking at, but it kind of goes to the top. It's described as the house and the foundation. So this is the structural integration. It's very durable. It's long lasting. It's resilient. And when Arlington did this about 10 years ago, I think it was 20 years ago. Oh, okay. Time flies. 20 years ago, they were able to reduce the number of trees to be removed. Initially, I understand it was in the thousands, or at least 1,000 trees. Maybe Councilor Malachy knows the exact number. But they ended up removing 155 trees, which is a huge reduction. Why? It seems to me the city is looking at the most inexpensive way to do it, and also the least disruptive to the neighborhood. I understand that, and the roads. But at this point, I'm thinking that we have to look a lot more closely at these other alternatives. It's very important to the community to have a safe dam, and also to minimize tree loss. So I think, can't we do both? Can't we really make an effort to do both and put more resources into that? So that's my question, is why is the Arlington model off the table, it seems?
I would defer to the Office of Dam Safety. I think there was a Public Facilities Committee meeting that they participated in. That question was asked. The best response I think they got to the group was, it was a different administration, different set of rules that have changed over time. I can't speak for them as to why they would allow that.
I don't think that was a good answer
Now, what I've been involved with
that they made, not you.
lots of communities across the state with similar issues. They're pretty consistent these days, from whether or not it's a state agency, a community, or a private owner of requiring the tree removal.
One more question. How did that Leominster Dam do during the terrible flooding that happened in Leominster?
My understanding is it served as well. They have a second dam that had a significant overtopping event last year. They had, I think it was 15 inches of rainfall in the city of Leominster. But that particular dam, from what I understood, had no damages to it.
That was more than 100-year storm, wasn't it? Was 15 inches, was that in like over 24 hours, or was it 2 days?
I think it was in like 12 hours.
12 hours.
It was very focused from what I've heard.
And they're kind of in a valley in Leominster.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. A question about option 1, where it involves the installation of the sheet piles that are 12 feet deep. The question I have is, first of all, does that go up higher than the wall, than the levee now goes up? In other words, do we get more protection against overtopping? And number two, if those sheet piles are to be driven down 12 feet, how much, or how can we find out how much ledge there is in that neighborhood? And what if you take the goal is to drive a 12-foot sheet down and after 6 feet you hit ledge? What's the fix on that?
Yeah, this is the dilemma, I think, with that solution. Currently, we are not proposing it to raise it up, meaning retain more water in the reservoir, because we'd have to chase that off of the dam. Right now, the street grade controls the level of overtopping. If we were to put that sheeting in, we couldn't just stop it in the middle at the end of what we call the dam. It would just go right around and start to erode adjacently to the system. The challenge is if we hit ledge that isn't something we can tow into. Typically, when we drive a sheet pile and we use it for soil retention, we want to have about 2/3 of it buried for the third that's trying to hold back what we're trying to hold back. That's how it gets its stiffness and stays in the ground. We're not going to have the luxury of that here because we have the rock that's relatively shallow. So we need to get some kind of embedment into the rock to be able to pin the toe, so to speak. And then we need that dead man system on the top to hold it back. If we were to try to use it to raise the water level of the reservoir, it's just additional loading. I think it would be it's just going to be more challenging for that system to work. So we haven't considered that yet.
Okay, and is my understanding of this that in the only way that we could prevent a breach, an erosion of the downside, is by having some kind of matrix that's put there that cannot be put there because there are trees there? Is that the issue? There has to be a matrix in order to prevent the
There needs to
breach?
be some sort of hardened structure. Water at different velocities moves different types of materials. So, at 4 feet per second, grass could be fine. This would be more velocity than that, though. So then we can use different types of riprap or the articulated concrete block. At some point, it becomes for spillway chutes that see 40 or 50 feet per second, we use concrete. So, we look at the types of velocities and we try to come up with a system that will resist the erosion of those kinds of forces.
Just one more question. I'm not clear on your answer to my question. What happens if you take a 12-foot sheet, try to drive it down more than 2/3 of the way, let's say, and then you hit ledge? What do you do then?
Then we'd have to figure out how to change the design on the fly. We would be at risk of having a system that might not work as intended, and we'd have to come up with another solution, modify that section, provide additional dead man anchorage, because we might have a deeper excavation with an offset into the embankment with some more dead man system to help provide the retention.
And has there been a study has there been an attempt to determine whether there is ledge along that 200 feet that we're dealing with?
We know from some previous borings that were done, there is rock roughly about the elevation. We're showing it on those images. If there, we only have 2 borings out of a 200 feet. Those show you about 4 inches each. So we owe a total of 8 inches over the 200-foot length. So without doing a significant more exploration, that will help reduce some uncertainty. But like all underground work, construction, the reality doesn't become clear until you're in construction. There's always a risk with underground construction.
Thank you. So, it seems to me that while the Office of Dam Safety has identified what it believes is a safety issue, and by the way, the Office of Dam Safety, state agency under DCR, handful of employees, right? It's a small office. So we're really talking just a few people who are making policy here, which is fine, but I do think we need to put some context. This is not some huge agency that's doing this. It's a small group of folks who presumably have a fair amount of expertise in that. They've identified a problem, which is important. But the real issue, it seems to me, is regardless of whether the dam is breached or the dam is overtopped and holds, the whole purpose of this entire exercise is not to preserve the dam per se, but to prevent or greatly reduce destruction downstream. That's really what we're getting at, right? Okay. And it seems to me that so far we've done no studies whatsoever as to what can be done to expand the culverts, to improve the stream depth, or any other measures that would help reduce the downstream harm, regardless of whether the dam is breached or not. Is that also right?
Leave that to the commissioner to.
And I understand, Commissioner, that you've been given some direction as to how to pursue this too. So I understand you're operating in a constrained environment here.
Happy to investigate that. It would be a significant undertaking. I think that we would have to take properties in order to enlarge the culvert that goes behind Hull Street. Anything to add to that, Tom?
So, so the administration identified an urgent safety issue, but this has been before us for 7 years now. This is not a brand new finding. This is a finding from 2018. And my concern, I think I heard it from Councilors Mickley and Farrell, is we've known about this for a very long time, but we apparently have not done any investigation. I'm not faulting our DPW. I want to be explicit about that. All right, I will be very, very clear about that. But we have not done the analysis as to what we can do to mitigate the harm downstream. If we did that analysis, that might, I say the word might because I use that advisedly, change our decision-making as to what alternative we take to reduce the dams. I put that out there for my colleagues. One point of clarification, because I want to understand something. I actually walked the site on this weekend. There's a kind of a roped off area with tape. Is that all what's going to be taken down, every single thing within that area? Is that right?
I'm not familiar with what's roped off down there. I don't recall that we've roped it off.
There's some kind of tape on various places around there. It looks like that, but I don't know.
There was a wetland delineation flagging done a few months ago. It could be flags where we identified wetland species and capture that information.
That may have been what I was looking at, and I appreciate that. I think it'd be very helpful for this council to, we talk about taking site visits, but it might be helpful to actually see visually what's being proposed to be taken down, and also to have some examination of the conditions of the culvert and the brook below the Bullows Pond Dam to get some idea of what that condition's like too. I think that'd be useful. Last question. I think you've identified sapling, you're including in your number of trees, some very small trees, saplings, right?
That is true. Correct.
All right. And in all three alternatives, the number of small trees less than 5 inches is the same. And those trees, their trees are beneficial. They don't clearly have the value as a much larger tree might. And it's in that larger tree differential that's the difference in between options 1 and 2 and 3. Did I get that right as well?
That's roughly true. If you could go to that slide.
I think there was the slide said that was something between 29 and 53, something like that.
I think it's that
Yeah.
one there. Yeah.
When you did can I ask you this? When were you brought on to do your work initially?
We started in 2022.
Okay. Was there another company beforehand? And do you know what happened to their work?
There was a previous company the city was engaged with before. I think the way that the RFP went out on the street for public bidding, and it was posed as a new set of, eyes to have different consideration.
And Commissioner Sullivan, when was the prior company, when was the relationship terminated?
2021.
And you came on board, what, 2023?
2022.
2022. So there was a gap of what, a year or so between the two entities?
I wouldn't say it was quite a year. It was about 6 months. We engaged GEI in February.
And was there some reason that there was a delay from when you were brought on board to when you came before us for the first time?
No, there was just work that we were doing, working with the city. We had a number of meetings. We met with the Bullis Pond Association, some of their leadership a few times, just as part of that process of.
And when was your first meeting with the Bullis Pond Association?
We met them on our first site walk, kickoff meeting, and then we met them, later that fall after we had a chance to give some consideration, do our own hydraulic study. Some of the geotechnical explorations we did, which were looking in the pond itself for sediment probing
and that was what,
starting to brainstorm.
2022 or 2023 or
That would have
2023?
been, I think, fall of 2022. I think we started in late winter, early spring 2022.
And so it's 3 years later now that that at least the administration has said this is an urgent problem that must be dealt with, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So the dam's about 400 years old. Has it overtopped in those 400 years?
Not that I'm aware of. I think in its current configuration, it's about 100 years old is my understanding. And the reports are that it has not, although I think there are some reports that it's been fairly close to the crest.
Okay. And this is maybe to the commissioner. So I think a year or two ago, and Councilor Mickley would know very well, the library flooded. And that, I think, went into the pond in front of City Hall. How did that affect Buller's Pond?
We got 3 inches of rainfall in about a half an hour, I believe, and it did increase the water level in Bullo's Pond. It did not overtop during that event.
Okay, and then we do dredge the pond here in City Hall, but do we ever dredge Buller's Pond? And if not, why not?
We have dredged Bullo's Pond back sometime in the 90s. We have not. There's 6 inches of sediment. We wouldn't dredge for that.
Okay. One of my concerns is the removal of the more mature trees. And we haven't had a 100-year storm where it has overtopped. In any of these solutions, it's going to overtop. But we, the city council, we get emails that say, oh, my neighbor cut down 2 trees in their backyard and now my basement floods every time it rains. Trees just suck up all this water and prevents flooding downstream. And so now if we remove all these trees, even though we're not getting overtopping, they're absorbing so much water. I would think that we would have more flooding downstream and people's basements would be flooding and streets would be flooding. And it'd be more of a normal occurrence. Has that looked into at all?
I would say, as we model the storm, we look at the grass covering as a type, it doesn't materially impact because it's a relatively small area relative to the footprint of, the area that's getting rain at the same time.
But grass does not absorb as much water as rain, not even close. And I mean, when people's backyards are not that big and, you take out one tree, it affects a whole much bigger area. Councilor Maliki might know the data specifically, how much water one tree can absorb. And so I worry about flooding downstream more often, taking out so many of these mature trees. Thank you.
I think I heard my name called, but I'm not sure.
Yes, Councilor Humphrey.
All right, thank you. So as I mentioned to an earlier council when this came before us before, I've had a sort of lifetime personal interest in dam safety issues. My mother's side of the family was very involved in agriculture, irrigation engineering, and related issues. Dams can fail completely, incredibly fast from very small faults or points of damage. That is part of the discussion that I think has been a little bit undersold tonight in what it is that we're considering as potential scenarios here. We're not just considering the overtopping. Unfortunately, we've been going around and around on this for about 8 years with each other, with the state. I think I'm a little concerned there's a lack of institutional memory problem on this issue because of council turnover or staff turnover or people just not really remembering it as an issue between meetings. We on this council in my 3rd term are pretty close to where we were as a council in my 1st term when that council delayed action to try again with another consultant effort. I am also concerned about the issue that people have brought up, certainly about that the proposals before us now are still allowing overtopping inundation, but we're also sitting on a time bomb for the much more catastrophic scenario. And we keep arguing with the state about this, but I think in many ways we're not really understanding the point that the state is trying to make with us. The overtopping scenarios, they're still possible, but they're somewhat unlikely in relative terms, whereas there is significant concern about the dam itself completely collapsing based on the existing conditions of the dam. And that's the main thing that they're interested in having us mitigate, I think. And, I think Councilor Farrell touched on this point, but like a couple of years ago, I traveled to Montpelier, Vermont, just after they had massive floods there. I think it was about 2+ feet of water, related to some significant rainstorms. And the amount of mud and debris strewn across the landscape and just thick inches and inches of mud, it's kind of unimaginable even after all the water had gone down. And it caused about $100 million in damage, and would probably be a lot more on a similar thing here. But I do feel compelled to comment on, I think, 3 of the comments raised by councilors, or questions raised by councilors Kalis, Leary, and Wright. So I think we need to be a little bit careful when we're talking about the impact or effects of trees, positive or negative, in terms of we don't want to conflate things. So it is absolutely true that the trees, vegetation, wetlands in general, whether upstream of a dam or downstream of a dam, help slow down the flows of water, and that's super important for flood mitigation. But the point that the state has been making this whole time, which has been my concern all along, is that trees in the dam itself pose an existential threat to the dam. Now, you might say, well, the dam's been around for 400 years or so. I think for a significant portion of that, they probably were being a little bit more careful with it. I think maybe some at somewhere along the line, some past generation not fully understanding the implications, allowed trees to grow into the dam where they probably shouldn't have been. The issue, and this is why the state is taking such a hard line on this, as I understand it from reading all of the materials over the years on this, is that if there's a significant storm, windburst event, something like that, that physically rips out a tree, that is an automatic breach of the dam, right? It takes out the whole tree down to the roots, which, by the way, if you walk around someplace like Cold Spring Park or the aqueduct areas around there, you keep seeing that happening. These giant trees come crashing down, they rip up with all the roots and everything. That is now a massive hole in the dam that is almost guaranteed to be a catastrophic breach at that point. That is a completely different discussion than whether or not trees slow down rainwater, essentially, or stream water or whatever. Similarly, if one of these big trees dies in place, but it doesn't collapse on the spot, it creates a void space in the dam, and something might even look like the dam is structurally sound when in fact there's a significant hole where there used to be roots. So that's not, I'm not raising any questions here other than that I do share the concern about making sure we are dealing with the overtopping scenario. But the dam breach, dam failure scenario is a significant one. It is real as a concern. And I think that some of the points, we need to be very clear about what it is that we're talking about here and why there's discussion about removing some of these trees. It's not my favorite solution either, but I think they're not pulling this out of nowhere as a concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Nickerson, thank you for the presentation. I just want to echo one thing that Councilor Laredo said, and I mentioned it briefly in a prior item we discussed tonight. This is kind of like a land use petition. It's important to do a site visit. I know I've done site visits for this dam since I've been on the council. And Mr. Nickerson, I think you said you did a site visit with the Bolos Pond Association. I think I heard that correct. And you're nodding your head yes. Just wondering, when was that, and what did you observe?
I visited the dam several times. One was when we first kicked off a meeting with
the mic up.
At the beginning of our work with the city early in 2022. I visited the dam just about every time I've come out to a meeting. I've often take a drive by it to take a look at it. We've done some work where we've taken more photos. We did some sampling on the downstream slope back in 2023 timeframe. So
okay. Have you ever visited the dam or Bolos Pond during a rainstorm?
It has not been raining when I've been there, no.
Okay, so, all right. Well, I have. And I think you said in one of your opening statements is that the spillway is undersized. Is that correct?
That is correct. It cannot pass the 100-year design flood.
It cannot pass. Okay.
Which is what the state requires.
All right. I mean, it was a nor'easter. It was not a 100-year storm. When I was in Laundry Brook Forest, I mean, I'm comparing apples to oranges now. I do understand that, but I don't see how that spillway is undersized. That's just my personal opinion. Let's see. I know you came on board in 2022 and there was a prior plan before you joined this project, let's just say. How different is this plan today, option 3, different from the plans that were being proposed in the past?
The option 3 is similar to one of the proposed solutions from the previous consultant.
Okay. And okay, well then I'm going to ask Commissioner Sullivan, what ultimately did we as a city, the city council, DPW, the administration decide with that prior plan? Was it ultimately rejected? Clearly it wasn't approved.
The plan wasn't rejected. The request of the council was to go through an RFP process to hire a consultant.
But the plan on the table was similar to what was being proposed, no?
It was one of the options that was proposed. I don't believe they ever got to a vote on
Okay.
those.
All right.
Any
So
of the options.
I'm sorry. Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
I don't believe they voted on any of the options.
The council did not vote on any of the options.
No,
So why was it dropped?
it was at the request to hire a different consultant to look at other options.
And we're back at the, where are the other options? I mean, respectfully, it's the same option as before.
I believe the GEI investigated 9 options. 3 of the options rose to the level of acceptance with the state and were feasible.
Okay, well, thank you. Let's see, can you just, Ms. Flynn, can you go to slide 12, please? I have a, there was something that was shared. I just want to go over it again. Number 12. There we go. What does MADCR stand for?
Massachusetts Department of Conservation.
Oh, yeah.
Protection, sorry.
I just know it as DCR. I never see it as MADCR, putting in extra letters. Thank you. So they are indicating that they would not approve a preemptive drawdown operation or manual operations. I think that's what Councillor Mickley was implying. Is that right? Nodding his head, yes. Thank you, Councillor Mickley. So it says they indicated, but I don't think we've heard that from them directly. And I would like to know why or why not. What is wrong with, bringing down the level, the water level down so that when we do get that 100-year storm, the pond is lower and it won't overtop and it won't cause erosion. It won't breach. What is wrong just with that idea? Forget the Office of Dam Safety for a second. What is wrong with that concept?
When I say they indicated, they specifically told us they wouldn't when we met with them. The reason is because what happens would be we need to rely on forecasts. So in forecasts, it's going to rain tomorrow. So we send the DPW department out there and we drain the pond. And then we get half an inch of rain and it isn't an issue. Happens again 3 months later, happen again 6 months later, happen again a year later. Pretty soon, people stop doing it. It doesn't look like it's a big deal. Operationally, we're left with a drawn down pond. Takes time to restore the water back into it. So I think that fundamentally they don't like all the state agencies that I've interacted with, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Maine, New Hampshire. They won't allow anything that requires human intervention. And in some places, or gravity, for example, you've got to lift gates and things like that that could fail. So that's, and the state has basically said anything that would require human intervention, they wouldn't accept.
Okay, but we're not talking about a generic rainstorm or a nor'easter. I mean, we're talking about a 100-year storm. And I don't know how many 100-year storms we've had since this dam was built in the 1600s. I would assume a few. I don't know. I'm guessing. But it wouldn't be for your average or heavy rainstorm. It would be for a 100-year storm. I would presume our forecasters in that particular industry would know when we are going to get one of those 100-year storms. And that is when it would be activated to draw down the water. It wouldn't just be, next weekend we're getting heavy rain. No?
I don't think we're that accurate. I mean, I think the city of Leominster is a great example. They had no idea they were going to get 15 inches of rain last summer, and that's what happened.
Well, I mean, tearing down 199 trees and completely, starting over on Dexter Road and Bullows Pond, I don't think, as of right now, I am not convinced. I also am, I mean, we brought this up before in working group meetings, and that is Hull Street. That is where the flooding is going to begin. What does this option 3 do for that grate at Hull Street?
Could I answer that
Oh.
one? So we do have personnel there every heavy rainstorm with a front-end loader, I believe, to remove any debris.
Yeah.
To ensure that that grate stays clear.
Okay, so.
There won't
oh,
be flooding.
Sorry, thank you. I know I did see a person, I don't know who it was, I didn't get their name, but I did see someone there with a rake working at that grate. But isn't that human intervention?
It is, and that would be outside of the Office of Dam Safety's jurisdiction.
All right, okay, I'm all set.
Counselor Baker.
So my apologies to those of you who've lived with this a long time, but as I understand it, I just want to follow up on Councilor Humphrey's point, as others have made it, that the reason the Office of Dam Safety is concerned is that they view the dam as itself not successful in stopping a potential breach, that there needs to be reinforcement that will prevent the breach in a way that would cause downstream flooding of a catastrophic nature. That's what I'm hearing, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so the question I'm trying to understand is that is the relative risk. We've heard the risk of overtopping is the one that's going to occur either way. That's what Councilor Mickley indicated. And I understand that. And he's saying that the damage done by either is so terrible that really it doesn't matter almost what we do because something terrible is going to happen. And we're satisfying the state for a risk that's one level catastrophe higher. What I'm trying to understand is the issue of the spillway cannot be expanded and that draws down the pond on a natural basis, but you have to have a system that is not human dependent. I was near Hurricane Irene in Vermont when it came through, and no one had predicted that it was going to come up into the inland of the area, and the degree to which the rivers rose and Brattleboro was underwater, and certainly parts of Woodstock and all of that area, if you know it. So I can understand why the dam safety folks are nervous about trying to predict when something is going to happen and what you can do to try and mitigate it. I guess what I'm trying to understand is that can we get a sense of the relative risk of overtopping versus breach? The issue of the trees, as I understand it, is because of the worry that they increase the risk of a breach on a natural basis when you get a heavy rainstorm or something beyond, because the pressure on the dam rises as the water rises, as I understand it. So what I'm trying to understand is the relative risk of a breach versus the overtopping, because an overtopping either way is going to be a disaster. But if the dam is made safer because of some of these measures you're talking about, so it doesn't breach, that's what I'm hearing the argument about, whether we should invest in that. But I wasn't clear that the solution being proposed is the best way to provide that. So let me just pause for a second and ask if you can respond to the question of relative risk of overtopping versus the breach.
I'm not quite sure how to answer that question exactly, but
let me see if I can be better at posing it. If the concern is right now that the dam is potentially unsafe or is unsafe from being breached because trees could cause some uprooting, as Councilor Humphreys indicated, some weaknesses in the dam, so a high level of water could cause a breakthrough. That's sort of the argument I'm hearing.
There's an increased risk. I think that I do think what the dam has going for it, it's very wide, carrying the road across the top of it. So, the trees on the downstream slope, while they could overturn, could have root balls that are, digging roots in towards deeper into the upstream. Those all create preferential seepage paths, which are the negative. I think on the size of the structure, the width of it, the distance from the upstream, I would feel like that would be a lower risk than a breach from an overtop.
So, but I guess what I'm hearing is that you're really worried in the project here is about a breach, not overtopping. Overtopping occurs either place, right?
Yes.
So I'm just trying to understand what are the risks that we're trying to assess for the breach? And that I'm not clear on yet, because that seems to be the justification behind the dam safety concern, right?
Yeah, so it's the release of the additional water stored at the reservoir versus just the water that makes it over the top.
Yeah.
So if we It goes, I think the one slide showed it was about 400 CFS cubic feet per second would go over the top on the current and the proposed options 1, 2, and 3. And if we breach the dam, it would be about 1,700 CFS, so in a little over 4 times that amount.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Greenberg.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Nickerson. Could you put up the slide for option 3, please? Okay, so that articulated concrete, will trees be allowed to grow on top of that? And if not, how will they be prevented from growing on top of that?
They would not be allowed anywhere on the dam structure itself or within 20 feet of the dam structure, the slopes, the toe of the dam. There would have to be a grassed turf that would have to be mowed a couple times a year.
Oh, so that would be grass turf like a lawn. And if any stray tree would start to grow, that would have to be removed.
Correct.
I see. And the city would maintain that.
Yes.
And would this be an open area for recreation? Would there be benches on there or anything
Yes.
like that?
Part of the Parks and Recs group, as they were imagining, some restoration work, had proposed some potential benches and areas for recreation.
Okay. That's my questions. Thank you.
Counselor Oliver.
Great, thank you. So I'll start by saying I'm not an engineer. I don't play one on TV and I don't want to. Way over my head in many of these cases, but I do want to pause and say thank you again for all the information that you presented tonight. You answered a lot of the questions that I had. All this conversation is really interesting to me. I do have one question, and I think it builds off of what I've heard from Councilors Mickley and Laredo. And if there's a better way to phrase this, any of the engineers here, please rephrase it. I'm just going to put it out there. If there were no Office of Dam Safety, and you knew that you had identified the same challenge that they did with this dam, would you have designed any of the 9 options that are in these materials? And I don't necessarily want an answer to that yet, but I do want to know, is any one of those solutions the full solution that you would put forward, that you would feel is the right thing to do in its entirety?
I think you're asking about all 9 options, put them on the table.
Or maybe is there a 10th option? Do you understand what I'm trying to get at? Like, my question might be a little kind of off, but I am curious.
I think I still end up at the option, the overtop and protection design with option alternative 3 as the solution. I think it gives you the most robust solution to protect the dam. And I am focused on the dam because I do think that's a more immediate threat than the downstream flooding, because it makes it worse. It allows the dam to not only be protected for the 100-year storm, but because it's armored, when a 200-year storm comes, it's going to be protected from that too. So I think gives you the most robust solution to stop the dam from potentially breaching.
Great. Thank you for that. My follow-on would then be, would you do anything else downstream or upstream that might help prevent perhaps an overtopping in any way, shape, or form, or mitigate some of the challenges and the problems that are going to happen downstream if my able colleague to my right is correct, and this is going to happen. It's just a question of when.
I do think that's a much bigger picture question to look at. There may
Yes.
be ways, things that, ways we could slow water down from getting to Bullows Pond. Are there additional paved surfaces? We can unpave City Hall as an example, parking lot. Let's allow as much permeability of infiltration of water into the ground. It's difficult to do in a well-established and developed community. So those would be the sort of options. Are there retention ponds you can build up from the water before it gets to the pond? Those require a lot of land. On the downstream side, it's about getting the water into, channelized culverts and things like that. And the volume of water we're talking about, we are looking at this because the dam safety world is different than street flooding world. The street flooding world looks at 10-year storms, maybe a 20-year storm in some cases. We're looking at a 100-year storm. So the streets aren't designed for 100-year storm events. In cities that have combined sewer overflows, they've gone as far as making $1 billion underground tunnels to store the water solutions. These are extreme.
Yeah,
I don't see those
right.
being viable.
Yeah, and again, I'm not going to hold you to the answer. That wasn't the point. But I think my point is there are other things that we should consider upstream, downstream. And it's not lost on me that the folks that the relatively small department, the handful of people, right, that are looking at these plans and reviewing them, it's not the protect the whole city, the Office of Protecting the Whole City. Their job is to look at the dam, right? And our job is only in part to look at that dam. I would like us to be thinking about it more broadly. And at the end of this conversation, we're all, 24 city councilors here are going to be asked to vote up or down on a plan. And I think what I'm hearing from my colleagues is a part of that plan should be the dam, but not the whole plan, right? Hey, please, yeah.
Something. I think it's important to note that we are in the process of redoing our stormwater infrastructure improvement plan that will look at the entire city and all of our stormwater issues and prioritize and address issues such as flooding and capacity.
And then, what I heard in the conversation from Councilor Baker also then applies is, hey, is there something we could or would do or would recommend or need to consider upstream and or downstream that would change recommendation number 3? Again, probably not something you want to answer on the fly here tonight, but to me, there's a logic there that we should chase to the bitter end. But thank you again.
Counselor Getz. Thank you for the presentation. And thank you because this topic is pretty, it's a large one. And even us in public facilities has spent quite a bit of time with this and I'm still learning. So thank you. I'm actually curious about the structural integrity of the concrete core wall. Is there any way to assess that? Is there any sort of in the past or, I don't know of densitometry, any sort of way to actually make that kind of assessment? And is that possible to do?
In a small way, we could drill explorations, borings down. We could core that. We would again see like a 4-inch sample of that in a couple of locations. So we could evaluate its, durability. If it's completely corroded and falling apart and breaks up in our hands as we take it out, that tells us something. If it's real concrete cylinder, we can break it, we can understand strength. But it's also an unreinforced wall, so that, thinking about how it has no structural steel in it. It has no structural steel in it. So it's a plain unreinforced concrete wall, we believe. And so the real challenge is making, even if it's in great shape, there'll be a fair amount of structural work to pin a new piece of concrete to that so they can all act as one rigid structure.
Yeah. Okay. I actually believe that, that it's unacceptable to have any sort of overtopping, just even to plan for it. And I also think the inundation maps have told us enough, that should never happen. So I think that we need to really sort of think through solutions upstream. And, ways to draw down the Bolos Pond, just because I sort of see it as if in fact, you can have, and you've spoken to it a bit this evening, channels or ways that are passive, that at a certain height, the water simply flows to a reservoir or an open space or something that's down, in the vicinity that actually acts as a way to sort of mitigate the potential of overtopping, and I think as both as the council, but also as for us, it's really important to think this through with a wider lens. Just because I appreciate what the Office of Dam Safety is requiring of us, but I also feel as if they don't, dictate that what we need to do to resolve this issue. Because I feel like overtopping should never occur. And, the amount of rising water and the potential breach, we need to understand the structural integrity of that core wall, and we need to reinforce. Because I truly believe that, this dam has been there and it needs to continue being here for hundreds of years. So I sort of see this as it's an engineering problem, but I think we need to spend the time, the energy, and I think we need to, consider the wider picture. Councilor Maliki.
Thanks. I wasn't sure if I was on the list or not. Okay, how many questions piled up? First of all, I'd like to recommend that everyone here, besides a site visit to the Bolos Pond Dam, take a ride over to Arlington and walk on the Arlington Reservoir Dam, because you will understand the frustration that Councilor Leary expressed and that I have felt, that the only answer from the director of ODS to the question of why is Arlington allowed to keep their trees after reinforcing their dam is that was approved by his predecessor. But take a look at Arlington and you'll see what it's like. Quickly, I was going to answer, Councilor Laredo was wondering about the timing of the meetings. The Bolos Pond kickoff site visit, which Mr. Nickerson and Lee Wooten attended, as well as others, was on March 11, 2022. We had a working group meeting that I think might have been kind of short on December 15, 2022. Then there was nothing in 2023. And then in March 27, 2024, we started having kind of a substantive meeting. And then the next meeting after that was October 9, 2024. And then November 20th. Oh, that's getting into public facilities. Okay. Also, to clarify one thing Councilor Humphrey was asking, he seemed to be under the impression that there was a risk of the dam just failing for reasons other than overtopping. And we've been assured repeatedly by the consultants and the city that the dam itself is structurally sound. It's that the overtopping risk that would lead to a breach that would be a cause of failure. I had, let's see, also the point about there was mention there of we're not allowed to do or not allowed by ODS to count manual interventions as a measure, but those of us who would like to see better weir technology and measures to improve either advanced drawdown or greater passage of water through the spillway, we're we're urging that automated measures be considered. And when Councillor Getz asked about that at the, that was at the April Public Facilities meeting, Lou Taverna said, yes, as part of the rehabilitation, we're looking at some sort of automation of lower the process of lowering water. So if they're considering it, that's good news, and I'd like to hear more about that. So I had some questions for Mr. Nickerson. The more I look at this, the more questions I think of, and I realized there were a couple of things I wasn't sure about. On your inundation maps, whether it's breach or overtopping, I'm assuming that the water level, projected water levels and so forth in the inundation maps, that includes the rainfall that's falling downstream of the dam. It's not just the water that's coming from the dam?
It is just. Thank you. I'll get used to this at some point. It is just the inundation from the dam water itself. It does not include rainfall water.
So it doesn't include the effect of it's going to be raining downstream from the dam too?
That is correct.
So whatever water levels you're projecting from the effect of 8.8 inches in 24 hours from overtopping or breach, you'd have to add the effect of 8.8 inches falling in Newtonville itself.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any idea what order of magnitude that would change the heights?
I don't.
Okay. All right. Another question I had, and I guess I'll preface this by saying, I am very concerned, as others have said, about the overtopping scenario. And we did not actually know what the overtopping scenario would look like until our July 28th meeting, because all we had seen up till then was the breach map. And I guess I asked about it, and Councilor Mickley asked about it at the April meeting, and we thought we'd get it at the June meeting, but we didn't. And Councilor Mickley asked again, and then we got it at the July meeting. So it's, I don't know if there's any way to put up the map that shows the blue area with the red area around it that was presented in July. Is that handy on anyone's computer?
Don't have it in the slide.
Okay. Because when you look to take an example at Newton North High School, so even the overtopping scenario for the 100-year storm seems to be encroaching into the building area. And then, of course, it gets worse with the breach scenario. But that's for an 8.8 inches of rain in 24 hours. And that's kind of the benchmark that ODS has for this type of dam, the 100-year storm, 8.8 inches in our area. But as was pointed out earlier tonight and by Mr. Yo at a previous meeting, Leominster got 15 inches of rain. Mr. Yo thought it was in 6 hours, whether it's 6 hours or 12 hours. Clearly a much bigger storm. And it seems like it would be useful from a planning perspective and to know how aggressively we want to take other measures besides the dam itself to reduce the effects of overtopping. It would be useful to know some other kind of mapping of other scenarios, whether it's 15 inches in 6 hours or, 4 inches in 2 hours or whatever, just to get an idea of how much worse things could be even than that. I also had some questions about heights. Following up on Councilor Danberg's question about the the bedrock. I was also curious about the bedrock because we've heard that it's kind of a problem that it's too high and we might hit it and have to tow in the sheet pile wall to it if we did that. Do we know, you mentioned the borings, but is there any record from whether it's 100 years ago when the excavation was done for the core wall, or is it possible to do through kind of like, ultrasound echograms or whatever to get a sense of how far bedrock is below the surface along that 200-foot length?
I don't have any historical information that I've come across that would indicate that. Obviously, there are things like test borings where we can physically go out and sample. There are geophysical methods where we could run like seismic refraction, which would bounce waves back and
That's,
get a
I guess that's
very
the term.
distinct
Okay.
just difference between the stiffness of the rock. It would give us, we could profile that.
Okay. And do you have a sense of roughly how far it is under, say, the surface of Dexter Road?
I believe it's in the order of 12 feet, plus or minus 5 feet.
Below road surface. So does that put it above or below the water level of the pond?
I believe it's the base of the pond. I think it extends, it's roughly just a little bit below the base elevation in the pond.
So the base elevation of the pond being the bottom of the pond. Okay, so the bottom of the pond is above where you think the bedrock is.
I believe it is, yeah.
Okay, because I was wondering about that, because I was wondering if well, first of all, if the bedrock ended up being somewhat above the bottom of the pond, you'd never actually drain the whole pond, I guess. And I was wondering if back when the dam was built, if they maybe built it where they did because the bedrock was high, but I guess that's unknown at this point. Let's see. So I've asked, as you recall, repeatedly about the possibility of increasing the capacity of the weir and the spillway itself, whether it's the Piano Key Weir or something like that. And the first constraint you hit is the fact that you say the Dexter Road opening, I guess, would have to be enlarged. The spillway itself would have to be enlarged. Is there a way to quantify, like, how much could we increase the flow over the weir before Dexter Road's opening became a constraint? If we enlarge the opening at Dexter Road, the next obstacle would be Walnut Street after flowing through the Laundry Brook Forest. It seems to me that, and you said that would make Walnut Street the dam, and it's not equipped to be a dam. This may sound crazy, but if we're trying to figure out a way to not have Newtonville flood, even in an overtopping scenario, would it be worth trying to make Walnut Street, that obstacle, be kind of a secondary dam to protect Newtonville downstream?
Yeah, to do that, you'd then narrow down or restrict the culvert there to retain water between Walnut Street and Dexter Road. It would restrict flooding, but the water right now is overtopping. I think that area would overtop, and then it would overtop Walnut Street, I think is what would happen unless we did a larger modification, like try to raise.
It seemed like, yeah, Laundry Brook itself could be sort of a giant rain garden because it's sunken down, and I'm not sure of the height of Walnut Street in relation to Dexter Road. It feels higher to me, but I could be wrong.
In our models, as we overtop, we do get throttled by the Walnut Street, and so we build water on the downstream side of the dam. But it is already, I think, functionally doing that in these scenarios. So it is absorbing some of that water. But I don't think it's big enough to retain all of it without raising that as a dam and then making sure we knew how that would contain as the water levels
Mhm.
rise higher.
Well, as others have said, I think it's really important to, it seems to me there's not one solution that's going to cure the flooding downstream, but it seems like we ought to be trying to combine as many measures as we can to minimize the effect of, whether it's 15 inches in half a day or whatever, as part of looking, as has been said, look at the big picture, not just the dam in isolation, because we're not going to get a lot of cracks at this.
You all set?
Yeah.
Council Gentile.
Thank you. I will be brief. I've been around for every discussion regarding this issue since day one. But as Council Humphrey pointed out, I feel the same way as he does, that we're no further along than when he first came to the council, which was, 5 years ago, I believe. And I just get the feeling that we haven't gotten anywhere, or we're not making progress. And so what I'm trying to understand, or what I'm looking for guidance on, is where do we go from here? Because we've gotten a number of emails these last few days. It's urging us to reject all 3 plans. It's not like, let's go with 2 versus 3 or 1 versus 2. The correspondence I'm getting is, we don't like any of them. It says that, they don't utilize modern technologies. It only meets the minimal requirements. And that's not very encouraging for us that have to make the decision to be talking about spending millions of dollars. We don't know how many. And yet we've got a constituency out there that doesn't believe in any of the plans. So if you have some ideas, knowing where we're at now, that haven't been, that might be a better option for us, I would certainly like to know about it. Where I don't want to go, with all due respect to the counselor from Ward 3, I don't really feel like taking a drive to Arlington to look at a solution that occurred 20 years ago that we have been told repeatedly the Office of Dam Safety will not approve. So with all due respect, why do I want to go and see that solution? So I wish that people would stop talking about Arlington, because we've been told that the people that make the final decision will not approve that application, no matter how many times you ask them to. So there was one email. It talked about a plan that utilizes modern sensor-activated automated outflow drawdown mechanisms and variable rate wear technologies that would prevent possible future overtopping, flooding, or breach, would also allow the Bullows Pond Dam to function as a flood prevention asset to protect upstream and downstream areas. I'm like Council Oliver. I don't pretend to understand all of that. Sounds pretty impressive. But I mean, what are people talking about? Are these things that we haven't explored enough? This is what you do. You can see where we're at. We're not making progress. The working group and the working group in the administration have not been able to come together. If they were all on the same page, we would have already voted this several months ago. But that hasn't happened. I don't understand why, but that is where we're at. So can you be Solomon and somehow figure out a way for us to get past this so we can come up with a solution?
Not sure I could take all of that on, but I will start with a couple of just responses to your questions on, automated systems and gates. Those are functional systems we can put in dams. I've got a dam that I'm going to go to Michigan tomorrow morning for site visits and construction. We've got massive steel crest gates. That's a $60 million construction project. We need the opening behind the gate to allow the water to pass if we were to allow that to happen. Things like stepped weirs, which water could come at different levels and start to pour over. We explored those as alternatives when we looked at, can we use the low level outlet, modify the low level outlet? We'd need essentially like 60 feet or more of straight from the dam to the downstream side passage. So that would be essentially eliminating Dexter Road, putting massive culverts through it. Maybe we could do a series. It's a new bridge. It seems less practical than the overtopping solutions we've come to. They all still require removal of the trees on the downstream side of the dam. So I think we've explored a number of those options and don't see them as viable versus what we've proposed. Clearly, there's downstream flooding consequences. I understand the comments, the questions, looking at this as a whole. To move forward, you could consider breaking those into two different types of projects and approaches, right? Where we deal with the issue at the dam, don't let it get worse by breaching, and then take on, how do we improve conveyance downstream for water that does overtop? Instead of waiting for the perfect solution, we step through it, and oftentimes we do that in projects. We start with one part of the project and then we keep building on that.
So it sounds as though you still are a firm believer in the option number 3 that you have been recommending to us based on the topography and a whole bunch of other things that you strongly believe. It's not just like it's the better of 3 evils or something. You strongly believe that that is the way for us to go right now, and then possibly look into some of these other issues, downstream, whatever.
I do, because I think it buys you, a fix for the more riskier potential, more damage. It allows you to design that where it's not just for the 100-year. It will exceed any other, not any other. I'd be a little careful with that. But most overtopping events we could look at. Is there an impact if it's a 200-year or a 500-year or a 1,000-year event? Will we do something a little different? And if the answer is no, or if there's a small cost increase, we might consider designing that into it. I think it builds the most robust system for the dam. And then it gives you, information for the next project downstream or the next project upstream to try to restrict flow into the dam or allow safe passage of water downstream of the dam.
Okay, my last question then is, there's reference to a recommendation, I think by the working group, I think it was 4B or something like that, which then outlined 6 steps. Are you familiar with that? Have you had a chance to review that recommendation?
I don't know if that's more recent. I'm not quite familiar with all the steps to that.
All right, well, I think it was referenced by, I hope other people saw it. It's not a figment of my imagination, but they recommended 4B or something that came out of maybe an alternative report or whatever. I think it would be helpful if you could take a look at that. I'll find it.
That may be the modification of the low level outlet to act as a stepped weir, like I mentioned we had looked at.
All right, we'll get it. But I appreciate you being clear, at least with what you think, where we should go from here. I appreciate that.
Councilor Kelly.
I was just trying to indicate that Councilor Lobovitz has his hand up on the screen.
Counselor Lobovitz.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Nickerson, for a very helpful presentation. Can people hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I really only have one question, and that is for Mr. Nickerson. If we were to go forward with the recommendation, alternative 3, does that preclude any steps to mitigate the flooding either upstream or downstream?
No, like I said, I think it doesn't do anything to mitigate what you could do upstream or downstream. You could always continue to make improvements to convey water downstream, or make improvements upstream to try to restrict or limit the flow coming in or slow it down.
So if we were to have a separate analysis, as Commissioner Sullivan said that was the intention, if we were to accelerate the one here and make it a priority, you are saying that, again, that as far as you know, that going with alternative 3 would not preclude any steps to ameliorate the downstream flooding.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you for answering my question.
So there are 2 more people that wanted to speak again, but I want to ask a quick question. You know the geography. If you wanted to drain the pond or divert the water on the upstream side, do we have places to do that without causing flooding somewhere else?
I am not familiar with any spots. It would be something that I think I'd have to look harder at to be able to answer that, but I don't know that I see that. You know, on the downstream side, my eye is drawn to grass areas. So the high school fields, can we lower those and store water there in flood events? You know, those are the kinds of things as engineers we start to look at.
And on the upstream, I mean, you said something about draining the pond, so I was just wondering where you put the water when you drain the pond.
When you say, well, sorry, restricting water, slowing water for upstream, it's about slowing water down from getting into the pond. So can we create upstream detention bases within the watershed, or for a more pervious zone, pervious zones, water would seep into the ground as opposed to travel over paved surfaces, as an example.
Councilor Mickley and Councilor Leary, do you both still want to speak?
Madam Chair, if I may, just a second. I found what I was referring to, and I sent it to you and I sent it to the commissioner, and it talks about the Bullows Pond Association newsletter, item number 4, and then it goes on to list the 6 recommendations. So if you could maybe take a look at that, just thanks.
So Councilor Mickley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to clarify a statement that Councilor Humphrey made before that Councilor Maliki corrected, which I think Councilor Humphrey's statement was a mischaracterization of what we're solving for and what we're not solving for. And just want to verify that my understanding is correct. We're not saying the dam is shaky, the dam is unstable. The proposal you're putting forward is solving for one potential type of breach, which only occurs in an overtopping scenario. Is that correct?
That's correct. I think Councilor Humphrey's comments, I agree with many of his comments about the negative side effects of the trees. We've seen them in smaller dam, like when the cross section is much smaller, they can do much more damage to the benefit of this particular dam. It's much wider because the roads build up on top of it. So, but a lot of what he said is true. The trees, as they fall over, I believe big uprooted root systems, water can start to wash through those, ravel them, even in rainfall events. You know, it's up to the city who's responsible to maintain the dam to identify those and go out there and fix those, so they don't lead to longer term problems. And roots that get cut off and are left behind rot over time. So you're left with uncertainty of what's in the embankment, so I don't think we're at risk of a breach, a sudden breach at any moment here.
Exactly. That's sort of the key point. I don't want people to walk away thinking that dam could breach any moment, even today when there's no rain. It could, it couldn't. Maybe it's on a fault line. Maybe there's a volcano. Who knows? But what we're mitigating for, what we're solving for, is the breach risk from overtopping. And Councilor Humphrey stated that the risk of overtopping is somehow less likely than the risk of a breach in terms of odds of it happening. And that's based on what we're modeling, factually untrue, because the breach, what we're modeling for is a breach that only occurs in an overtopping scenario. So let's say there's a 10% chance of an overtopping. Even if in 90% of those times it was a breach, then that still means there's only a 9% chance of a breach. And even more than that, what we're really saying is the overtopping is a precondition for a breach to occur. Correct? In terms of what we're modeling for and what we're solving for. Okay, that's just kind of key. I just want to make sure people walk away, because I think that came up a few times, and Councilor Mellick, he also corrected that, is, this dam could break any moment, not what we're solving for. We're solving for a particular type of break that happens from overtopping. And I think that was sort of what Councilor Baker was asking about, sort of what are the odds one happening versus another. And then I just think sort of your sort of breakdown of solving the dam before the overtopping scenario, to me, doesn't make complete sense, because then you're basically saying invest money, destroy, natural trees and area, and then still be left with this scenario, which maybe it's not your business line to focus on flooding mitigation. Maybe it's your focus to focus on dams. Is that sort of the right way to think about your general expertise and work area?
I would say it's both. We're charged with the dam safety issue, which we see as a bigger issue than the flooding issue. Not that I want to disregard that, say but that's the current condition of the system. And the only way to really stop that is to somehow stop water from coming into Belos Pond or retaining it all, which I don't know that I see practical solutions to do that.
Yeah, and I guess, how would you describe just overtopping issue? The overtopping is going above Dexter Road. That's a ton of water. I would think it's catastrophic. Do you think that's a catastrophic scenario even without a breach?
Yeah.
Do you think it's a catastrophic scenario to have overtopping without a breach?
It's hard for me to say. There's clearly a lot of area impacted as you get further down in the blue. While there's still water, it's much lower. The streets, have, generally 6 to 8 inches of curb and gutter to them. So, if we have 12 inches of water, it's really only a couple inches above the sidewalk level. So we're looking at this at a high level, and I'm sure there are properties that may be more impacted than others. And for those property owners, I'm sure it would be much more catastrophic to them to occur. I don't want to diminish that in any way.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And again, I don't want to sort of diminish your role and your focus. I respect the value and expertise you're bringing. And I just think it goes back to what Councilor Oliver and many others said, is our decision is about the broader impact to residents. And if we move forward with, solution 3, this is what success would look like, which to me, it's not. So thank you.
This is the list.
Yeah, so these are, I think, similar. Many of the options we've talked through between adding additional weir length, using systems like automated gates to control things. I think we still get pinched by the restrictions of the site without substantially removing much of Dexter Road.
Councilor Mary.
Thank you. I just wanted to go a little deeper into the concerns about the condition of the existing concrete. I still want to keep all our options open. So I know there are techniques for augmenting internal concrete core walls, and I was looking at options. There's permeation grouting that flows into the pores of the concrete to reduce permeability. And high pressure injection, which is like an epoxy that creates a structural bond, essentially welding the concrete together. And there was another compaction grouting, which is a plastic or semi-solid grout injected to densify loose material in increasing support. I was wondering if those options had been looked at when you have concerns about the possibility of what that old concrete looks like that's been buried for almost a century now. Would these be options that might serve you well if we decided to go with one of the other options besides option 3?
All of those items you just described are forms of what we call ground improvement, and they're designed more to stiffen the ground or lower the permeability. We use them sometimes. The permeation grouting is an example. You need open poured material. Generally works better in like a gravel or a coarse sand where we want a slow flow going of water through it. What we really need to do is make a structural wall. So we would have to figure out, can we dowel? So we'd have to get to it. We need to have a big hammer drill that will drill long dowel rods in. We'd grout those in, form a new section up above. What we need to make sure is that concrete we're doweling into has its own structural integrity to be able to bond with those dowel bars and connect the upper and lower sections. And then, so the condition of the concrete, I'm not aware of something we can do to the concrete itself, to improve it if it's deteriorated or weakened.
And there's no way to test that concrete wall ahead of the construction?
It is possible to go and find it, drill down to it, take a core sample of it, extract that and do some lab testing on it. That is possible. We would be able to see, a couple of locations potentially over the 200-foot length, but
Is it worth doing that?
I don't think so personally. I don't know that I see that as money well spent. I feel like would give us that information that we have a little better reliability on that. We also don't know the overall geometry of it because we're relying on something that was built 100 years ago. So when we lose the material on the downstream side of the dam, we're relying on that concrete section to be a retaining wall. And so when we look at how we look at that, we need a certain width, weight of that structure. And so if we can't if it's not going to work, so I'm not sure we know until we get down and excavate it and take a look at it. And to do that, we need to open up, even if we were to do exploratory test pits up front, we'd have to open up Dexter Street and get down in a safe excavation for us to observe it. It's pretty.
There's a lot of unknowns and the practicality of some of these you're not sure about. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I would hope so. Bullis Ponds in Newtonville, Ward 2, which is where I live. So I just want to point something out Councillor Maliki brought it up, Councillor Gentile brought it up. It has to do with the Arlington Dam. And I know, all the situation around that as it relates to this. But, at the most recent public records request that I found for the inspection of the Arlington Dam, it's safe. 20 years later, it's safe. It hasn't overtopped. It hasn't, anything like that. So I just want to put that out there, folks. So that's all. Not really a question.
I guess you have the last question.
Okay, well, I just actually am looking at the wetlands and conservation map that was recently generated by, in May of 2025. And I'm seeing an area of Edmonds Park that's a few streets over, that's looking like in terms of a landmass, it's at least, in terms of comparatively to Bullows Pond, it's at least 6 times the size of Bullows Pond. So I'm just sort of seeing this as a potential lateral sort of feeding into a system that could be whatever you would suggest as a leaching field, a holding tank, a reservoir, so that then there would be channels that would be not even automated, that they literally would be, at a certain level, the water goes laterally. It doesn't go and force on the dam.
I think we're out of questions. I want to first thank you for standing up here and answering all these questions. and thank the commissioner and your staff. So we will put this back on the agenda for public facilities and see where it goes from there. And I thank all of you for participating tonight, because I think everybody felt like you can see that it's complicated. It needs a lot of attention. So we will have it back on the agenda in September or October. I'm not sure yet which, and we'll go from there. So I think, do we need a motion to adjourn? Counselor Kelly has moved adjournment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thanks very much.